Our story kicks off in the heart of the lighted city, with the rain descending heavily from the sky like a weeping woman. We see a staggering man who struggles to walk under this heavy downpour with glistening tears in his eyes. He struggles to breathe with the sight of a lady like that of a mirage appearing before him. "Julia, please don't go," he cries out, but he slips onto a trash bin, and the sight is gone in a split second. But all thoughts dash to the mud when his eyes fall on sinister shadows observing him, only about to make out their dark features from their glistening eyes. Backtrack to an hour ago, and the Moondance Diner is a mess from the wrath of rain against its roof and cars, coupled with the lightning that spreads its tentacles throughout the sky. A soft feminine voice scurries into the kitchen. A second later reveals a beautiful blondie with a fallen expression as she pleads with her boss for an advance payment. Meanwhile, his cold, impassive demeanor screams at her to turn and run for the heels, especially when she mentions her daughter. He gives her the shocker of a lifetime when he slams his hands on the counter with disturbing effort, but turns into a big crybaby, crying about her sick daughter, Luna, and cheating husband. Wearing a warm smile, she defends her husband's against the bullets shot his way. However, after a little thought, accompanied by a long sigh, he agrees to her pleas, though informs her of his last act of generosity. The blondie is greatly overjoyed and relieved, thinking of Luna's prescription for the month. Furthermore, he becomes a motivator in seconds, saying something about the aspire to perspire of the motivation course, ensuring she keeps a healthy mentality and happy household, but she knows better than to achieve all that without money. On her way out, she tells him to have a lovely night, but before she makes it past the door, he calls her attention to the food stain on her shirt. "Wait, Olivia," he screeches, making her check the stain out, and she opts to have a change of outfit when she remembers the possibility of bumping into Max. Shortly after, we see Olivia Moore taking a stroll back home when she comes upon a semi-conscious body. A bunch of questions run through her mind as she battles leaving. Nonetheless, she gets terribly shocked when she sees a livid crimson leaking out of him. Out of reflex, she reaches for him, concerns wearing every inch of her profile as she questions her concerns. The young man in despair stares at her with blurry eyes, but catches her off guard when he grabs her wrist, making her properly straddle him, and then he begs her not to leave without him. Back in the apartment, Olivia Moore supports him, dragging him into her apartment. He bumps into the table, causing a piece of paper containing a note from Max to drop out of sight. He slumps on the couch, still reeling from the tingling pain of the wound, while she wonders what she is thinking to have brought a stranger home. But she gets defensive, knowing it inhumane to leave him to die when he desperately needs help. She moves quickly, flicking open his buttons. She takes in the muscular sight before her, but flinches when she spots the cut. Olivia Moore finally comes to a resolution to contact the paramedics after observing how bad his situation is, and at that very moment, his eyes pop open, grabbing her to straddle him in quick movements, shocking her to the very bones. She curses at him while trying but failing to get away from his grasp. However, he tightens his grip, leaving her confused as the phone rings continuously until it is dropped with reckless abandon. Locked in intense eye contact, she wonders where her control has dashed to, becoming fully aware of her willing body. Their faces inch closer, even as she takes in his handsome muscular features while their hands become touchy. Her phone beeps with a birthday message, but that doesn't distract the needing duo just as they lock their mouths in a kiss. The sky thunders with a heavy downpour, which does nothing but intensify their accidental makeout session, ripping her clothes in a flick. Moving forward, something strange happens when we catch sight of bullets falling off from the wound. The macho gender gets lost in his thoughts, recalling a familiar voice that accused him of ending Julia's life as he stared at her lifeless form, and he instantly jolts back to reality with the name Julia parting his lips. Wondering what had happened, he reflects on the earlier events of getting crashed into on his way home from a brief meeting. His driver was enraged, cursing and screaming. Meanwhile, he caught sight of Julia's ghost walking in an alley, and out of shared curiosity, he shadowed her. As the idiom, "curiosity kills the cat" goes, he ran into a bunch of thugs who launched at him. Unfortunately, defending himself got him shot severally, and returning to reality, he feels the sore spot already leaving a fading mark in its wake. Observing Olivia more closely, pulling her to himself, and sniffing her in an almost desperate manner, even though he can't help but wonder why she smells so familiar, like Julia. Olivia heats red but stops him before he can continue his actions, trying to make something of the awkward situation that they are engulfed in. Moreover, in quick movements, he flips her onto her back, pinning her with an intense glare as he questions her identity and the reasons for her actions. Moving to a different location, we get a glimpse of the picture frame sitting prettily on the table, but soon enough, we also catch sight of a masculine body in a hot, steamy bath that has us on the edge of our seats. The redhead could pass for a demigod, and that is a fact he is completely ignorant of, since he is submerged in thoughts of Olivia. A loud bang slams the door, followed by a scream of his name, Max filling the air. He recognizes the voice as Olivia's. Pumping with adrenaline, he rushes to the door, flinging it open to reveal a traumatized Olivia trembling, and he cradles her with a look of concern mixed with curiosity. She points in the direction of her apartment, and seconds later, we see the duo in her living room, which is now a madhouse. Unfortunately, the man from earlier has vanished, leaving her in awe. Sudden confusion kicks in as she begins wondering about the possibility of it all being a dream, but then again, she spots the blood smear on the couch from the position he laid earlier. Moving on, Max is highly concerned, suggesting they call the police, but she waves him off, expressing how fine she is, blaming the entire experience on the poor wind. Meanwhile, she knows better than to involve the police as it means missing workdays in a row, especially after getting an advance from her boss. Max doesn't buy her explanation, taking a look around the madhouse, or so it seems, but he decides to let it slide since he isn't in any sort of relationship with her. Although he informs her to hint to him whenever anything goes wrong, and she has never been more grateful. However, before the redhead finally takes his leave, he asks Olivia Moore out for a date to the movies the coming weekend, although not after pleading with her for his choice of clothing, but she declines his offer after giving it little thought. He finally leaves her to her peace, and for the first time that night, she takes a deep breath when she slumps on the couch. Now, in the midst of all this drama, a shiny object catches her line of sight, and she observes the tiny piece, reflecting on the ugly experience and wondering how he must have escaped through the window, especially in his condition. Shifting to a different scene, Damian Brown sits on his king-size bed in the almost dark room, nursing his injuries when a voice echoes from the doorway. He questions where he has been, but the fading mark on display prompts him to discover the cause. Damian Brown simply explains what happened in the alley as if it's no big deal, but it doesn't bode well with his driver as he screams at him for his choice of location. Moreover, the recovering masculinity seems totally unfazed by his driver's mini display of tantrums, informing him of the recent hallucinations. The man in the suit starts a mini-speech about the doctor's instructions and how he can't abuse the medicine since that will only trigger migraines and hallucinations. He further advises him to cut his dosages in a way that will still make him live like a normal human being. But Damian Brown dishes a side comment about the maker of the medicines and the level at which he deteriorates. But hold up, you won't believe what happened next, beholding a live transformation of a human into a werewolf. At the same time, he reminds Russell of how dangerous they are. In an age in which werewolves can no longer exist alongside humans, there's only one reason they have been able to avoid getting locked up, and it's all thanks to the drug, ISP, Instinct Suppressant Pill, made from wolfsbane. In the past, the plant was used to kill werewolves, but Damian Brown's father used that same property to formulate a liquid solution that can suppress the natural werewolf instincts. And while he was trying to refine the solution into a pill, he managed to develop a number of new drugs. Lo and behold, that's how the pharmaceutical company Terra was born. Flashing back to the awkward encounter from earlier, he observes the changes in his body, making him feel like his old self from before he started taking medication while squeezing the piece of cloth in his hand. He hands Russell the piece, giving him instructions to find the owner, as she is the key to a new formulation of the ISP drug. The discovery makes him supercharged as he sets out in search of the said person, but not after talking about a certain him. The next scene reveals the club in its climax moment, as people gyrate to the rhythm of the song, booming the building down. Shortly after, we catch sight of a sinister figure that could pass for a shadow, walking down the doorway with a scary confidence level. He calmly walks to the booth of a blondie named Silas, having the time of his life with a glass of beer. After saying something that sounds like a one-time warning, he descends on Silas, cracking his cheekbones with his fist. The blondie merely spits out the red liquid in his mouth, while the sinister man reminds him of his forsaken plans to take the life of his father and dear brother. However, Silas questions Turner's violence, teasing him about going through the stress, only to hit him and act as if he's the one with the revenge plan on the Brown family. Getting infuriated by the blondie's world, he reminds him of his position as an immature help, instead of the wolf he thought him to be, and that is all that needs to be said to make him go nuts. He launches at Turner, but in return, the latter patronizes his display of masculinity, compelling him to tag along with him since there are just enough schemes to plan. The following night at the Bubbling Moon Dance diner, we see Olivia Moore on a call with Minson while she hurriedly gets ready for work. They chat a little bit about Luna and her whinings, but good grief, she sleeps peacefully beside Minson. Olivia Moore informs her of the shirt's fate from the past day, but immediately promises to get her another. Minson's dramatics are outstanding as she screeches, immediately pinning the misfortune on Max, but the blondehead is totally over her friend's gimmicks as she sighs. The brunette further raises a conversation about the status of her relationship with Max, but she insists on the status being a platonic one, ending the call in the same vein after saying their goodbyes. Whew. Our leading female sighs, thanking her heavens for granting her an easy escape from Minson's matchmaking schemes, even though she has no time for such thoughts. Rummaging through her bag after possibly glaring lasers into it for the longest second, only to grasp the hard metal, her heart beating unusually fast as she flashes back to the events of the past night. Moving forward, she slams the door locker with an unforeseen strength, in a bid to distract herself from the mess her thoughts are slowly becoming. At that very moment, the door to the diner swings open, revealing Silas and Turner striding inside like they own the place. They take in the empty booths, alas, selecting one for a quick sit-and-plan session. Turner hands over a file, indicating the first target, and also questioning his readiness to initiate the sacraments, but the blondie only laughs at his big game plans. Quite doubtful, he ensures that the entire process will go smoothly as planned, but his partner ignores his fears, describing their first victim. Silas confirms his suspicion of using him to make a beta, and Turner expands the horizon of his imagination, describing how unique the beta will be. However, he doesn't forget to tease him concerning his expression from beholding the last beta, and this takes the mood from 0 to 100 as Silas screams at him to zip his mouth, the diner thundering from him, slamming his fist so hard. Suddenly, he looks towards a door when a familiar scent breezes his nose, and in quick steps he moves in the direction of that door. Flinging it open, he is startled by the lady before him, wondering what business he has with a human, just as he strides towards her. On the other hand, Olivia Moore is shocked by the male presence, screaming at him to go away and even threatening to call the police. He brutally ignores her, caging her in between his hands, and searches his brain for a reason that has her smelling like Julia, that is after he has done a great job of sniffing her. Wriggling furiously, she screams at him to let go of her, but a more intense smell breezes past his nose, which he recognizes as Damian Brown's. And just when you think the situation is about to break into a full-blown opera of despair, it actually does as Silas begins panting heavily like he's about to transform into something out of the ordinary. We are shocked to see Turner at the crime scene, even as he screams at his partner to get his act together, which, unfortunately, is too late as he already started transforming, judging by the color of his eyes. Quickly, he retrieves his gun, putting a bullet in his skull, and Olivia Moore watches in horror as his blood smears on her cheek and surrounding. Pondering the possibility of the blondie being feared dead, she jolts back, screaming at Turner to stay away, but he simply reaches her without much effort, wriggling the handkerchief on her face, and she gets lost in a trance. Nevertheless, a thunderous bang on the door jolts her to reality, and she gasps for breath, trying but failing to maintain her shock. Her boss pops in, inquiring about the reason for her absent-mindedness, but the traumatized lady simply recounts her experience, especially muttering something about guns and shots. She freezes looking around her to find everything intact like before, and she clutches her head when an intense headache strikes. Finding her display funny, he blames the migraine on too much sleep, but also informs her to put herself together, as they have lots and lots of work to keep them busy through the night. Alas, Olivia Moore is left to her thoughts, which she reflects on, confusing her recent encounters with a dream as she sweats profusely. In another part of the city, a church located amongst bushes comes into view. Moving on, we are entirely shocked to see Turner in a priestly attire as he carefully observes the bullets he had obtained from Olivia's keep. He ponders on the possibility of the almighty Damian Brown being shot, which confirms his health status as unwell, just as the rumors claim. Then again, he thinks about the messed up situation he had almost gotten himself in had he put an end to Silas, silencing him forever. However, he also wonders how the lady is connected to Damian Brown, making a mental note to look into her, but then a loud voice echoes in the background, calling out to him. Quickly hiding the metallic piece and slipping back into his priestly mask, he questions Brother Andreas about his reason for stopping by the church on a Wednesday. A joyful Andreas spills the tea about inviting him to a play that he will be featuring as the lead character, scheduled for Saturday. Furthermore, he introduces the scriptwriter, and Max takes the hint, properly introducing himself and patronizing his sermon. The young men offer a chat about their friendship, the priest only speaking when he questions Max's area of interest in his job as a reporter. The redhead speaks about running after celebrities, at the moment making the men share a quick laugh, and Andreas, already bored of their conversation, cuts into it. He gets back to persuading the priest, even making mention of the VIP seats had secured. But priest's answer remains as before, talking about his busy weekend schedule. Giving up, the young man walks away, bickering about a certain single hot mom that he had invited, turning different shades of red when he announces the status of their relationship as just friends who wish each other well, and Andreas makes the final joke as they exit the church, laughing hysterically. The next scene reveals Minson pestering Olivia Moore about her date, but Olivia Moore is lost in thought, still reeling over the dream that appears too terrifying to be true, and Minson screams at her, jolting her into awareness of the world around her. She brings Luna into her detective job, using the poor little child to snoop around her mum's dating life. Olivia Moore immediately replies to her daughter, letting her know that she is too preoccupied to be in a relationship. But Minson strides into her closet, coming back with a stunning outfit. Since the blonde head knows better than to stay in and wallow in the misery of her encounters, she refuses the dress from her friend after claiming it's too much. The brunette informs her of needing the too much to take things to the next level. Additionally, Minson questions her true feelings towards Max, drawing her into an imaginative trap of getting intimate with him. Her heart beats loud and fast, already knowing that a relationship with him won't be bad. The following day, we see Max in the Terra CEO's office, looking around in awe as he awaits the time for his interview. A quick note states that Damian Brown is a pharmaceutical magnate who appears suddenly and captures everyone's attention. Rumors swirl around him. Some say he is the illegitimate child of a CEO from a pharmaceutical company, while others whisper about a scandalous affair with a high-profile figure. Recently, tabloids even claim he battles a drug addiction and suffers from a rare disease. This personal struggle reportedly fuels TerraCure's relentless pursuit of developing treatments for uncommon medical conditions. Max is obviously having a migraine merely thinking about his editors whining to dig up every dirt on him, wondering why the focus is on his private life rather than his company. Shortly after, we see Max conducting an interview with Damian Brown and his assistant as he asks his next question. What's the focus of this year's conference? He questions, and the nerdy assistant goes to answer the question, although the interviewer stops him, requesting Damian Brown to provide an answer to the question, given his intrinsic knowledge about drugs. Dark, golden eyes flash his way as he bites out the question of the kind of drugs he is inquisitive about. Max is quite shocked at his response, as he thought him to be disoriented as the rumors claim. Damian Brown's the interview almost immediately, but Max is persistent in getting him to talk, thinking of a way to get his attention. In that instant, he questions the recent activity that might have piqued his interest, but the assistant does all he can to dissuade him from asking personal questions. Max further says something about his reader's interests that only irritates Damian further as he screams at him to exit his office. The poor assistant does everything to push him out, which only makes Max a bit curious, even as he wonders if the rumors about his illness are true. Later that night, an SUV parks in front of a tall building as Russell steps out, although on a call with Damian Brown, who pleads with him to hurry while coughing into a handkerchief. Soon after, he pounds on a certain door with every strength he can get, and after some seconds, Munson peeks through the slightly ajar door. Ignoring the daggers, he glares at her. He flings the door open and pulls her to himself, then takes a long sniff of her smell, as she screams at him to let go of her. Nevertheless, Russell is a bit confused, wondering why she smells the same, but looks different. The brunette is clearly annoyed, inquiring about his reason for sniffing her, but he simply hints at John, who stands close by, to exit the building. She screams at their backs as they exit, cursing and wondering what has happened to mankind. The next scene reveals Max all suited up for his date as he knocks on Olivia's door, and instantly Olivia Moore appears in the doorway, looking all dolled up and flushed as they compliment each other. She relates her worries concerning the dress, and he announces how gorgeously looking she is. Nevertheless, she rushes in to grab an umbrella due to the heavy rain brewing. Staring out the window, memories from a few nights back flood her memory, but suddenly we see Julia running into the wild. Our curiosity heightens when we see a hand that happens to be Silas grabs her, pleading with her not to leave. In the nick of time, his hand shoots up from the spot Turner had buried him, the latter helping him to his feet as he tees him back to earth. Continuing from before, a bar comes into view, and we find our match-made couples sitting at the bar for a couple of drinks and conversations. Max apologizes for the disappointment that follows the night, and Olivia Moore, being so very understanding, waves him off, showing concern about his friend instead. Max seems quite uneasy at his friend's absence, which started 30 minutes earlier when he was told of Andreas's absence. Getting really concerned, she questions the need to look for him, although he plays it cool, recounting when he dozed off in the subway on their first meetup as pals. Olivia's interest is piqued, discovering the history they shared in New York when he served as a war correspondent and his friend a soldier. Furthermore, she questions how he ended up in the situation, and he briefly recounts his past, which connects to his present life with his family, completely unaware of his whereabouts. Taking a deep breath, Olivia Moore relates to his experience, also recounting her past when he pries further. Showing little emotions, she recounts her childhood, making mention of the death of her parents at a very young age, which ignited her decision to become an adult and a parent as quickly as possible. She doesn't end there, also recounting the inner peace she felt when she met her husband and then Luna after some time later. Continuing from before, she voices how she had met her husband buried deep underground 8 months later after he had proposed to her. She talks about Luna's predicament, after being born prematurely with a terminal illness that is without cause, and also blaming herself for bringing a child into her dark world. The next scene reveals a lifeless body being butchered by a white werewolf when Turner calls out the name Silas. He screams at him to hold on, but transforms into the beast when he sees that Silas is completely nuts. Silas points out the lifeless body, seeking a way forward, and Turner informs him to patiently wait for 3 days, when the body will be taken to a morgue, making it a lot easier for them to access. Although Silas is exasperated with his Bible talks, he hears him out as he rambles about a werewolf rising on the 3rd day. However, Silas diverts the conversation to the lady from the diner, informing Turner to treat her matter with urgency, because her thoughts alone drive him to the brim of madness. Back in the bar, Olivia Moore basks in the deafening silence. hating herself for talking about her husband, and only then does she notice the ring on her finger, which makes the situation even more awkward. "Olivia," Max whispers, informing her of the wine smear sitting pretty on her lower jaw, and she slightly panics, turning a dangerous shade of red, but he offers to wipe it off. Now, in the midst of all this drama, they stay locked in each other's eyes, and her heart does a thing of its own when it begins to beat loud and fast. Breaking the eye contact, she decides to call it a night. Nevertheless, he covers her hand and squeezes reassuringly, voicing out their happiness as his priority. But she wonders if she really deserves happiness. Trying her best to remain calm, he whispers her name, and she pecks at him in response. But carried away by the euphoria of the moment, she leans into his embrace and kisses him to her heart's content. After a few seconds of a breathless kiss that leaves them yearning for more, Olivia Moore informs him of her intentions to achieve something with him. However, a great deal of confusion flashes across his face, but soon he realizes what she implies, smiling at how lucky he is. The clattering of bottles reveals what she desperately needed to do. "Nice shot," he compliments her, also confirming his suspicion as she announces her race for bowling ever since she overheard her friends talking about it in middle school, simultaneously popping a drink open and handing it to. Olivia Moore admits to having never gone on a proper date, and guess what? He also admits to the fact, making mention of studying as a hindrance. Suddenly, she grabs his hand, suggesting they make a bet for the loser to grant the winner's wish. And that's all they need to do, to unleash the athlete within them. The duo plays hard until they are out of breath, and Olivia Moore falls to a chair, questioning Max's bowling skills since he can pass for a professional. Simultaneously putting her heels on, he announces that it's his first date bowling, but has been bowling much since before, and she feigns a mock cry of being tricked, which only makes him smile even more. Watching him care for her leg, a sad smile briefly mars her face. Nonetheless, she brushes it away and asks what he intends to wish for. On the other hand, everything happening at the moment is a dream come true for him, and he questions what she would want him to wish for, cupping her face. The next scene reveals the soon-to-be couple in an intimate moment as he peppers her with unending kisses. Moving on, she stops him, talking about washing up due to sweats from the bowling, but then he suggests bathing alongside her, which makes her gasp with uncertainty. Max, not able to deal with uncertainties, suggests that they take things to the next level. Almost at the same time, her phone rings with Minson's call. And shortly after, they are seen in the hospital, just as Olivia Moore demands what is happening to her daughter. Minson feels miserable at this point as she explains to her friend what had led to her daughter's seizure, and about that time, the doctor announces she had just fallen asleep. He further explains the state of her illness and how difficult it could be for her to regain consciousness. Olivia Moore staggers due to shock as she buries her face in her hands and sobs for her daughter's pain. Moreover, Max suggests that Luna be sent abroad for treatments. The doctors simply let him know the impossibility of administering the treatments without being aware of the root cause, but this only enrages him as he enters into a heated banter with the doctor. The doctor makes mention of the treatment of rare diseases, and he flashes back to his interview with Damian Brown and his assistant. Becoming suddenly calm, he guides her out of the room to share his ideas concerning his recent discovery. Fast track some days later, Max enlightens Olivia Moore about the Terra Pharmaceutical Company, informing her of the company's conference meeting that starts at noon. He promises to reserve her a spot to ask questions, and she has never been grateful enough. However, she almost breaks down, beating herself for being the worst mother on earth and wishing she had done more rather than going on a date when her daughter needed her the most. On the other hand, Max ensures that she doesn't blame herself, taking it upon himself to save Luna regardless of the medical bills, making her break down even more. The next scene reveals her in the woods as she catches sight of a wolf hovering about her, and due to instinct, she runs through the bus path for safety, although wondering why she acts strangely. Suddenly, she spots Damian Brown at the far end, instantly recognizing him, and she jolts awake. Her line of thoughts a mess, as she wonders why he appears in her dream yet again. Back in the Terra Pharmaceutical Company, Damian Brown and Russell share cold pleasantries, and the latter explains the reason he could not accomplish the mission of finding the mystery woman. He blames him for giving random shirt pieces and not so detailed descriptions. Meanwhile, Damian Brown battles giving up as they both step into the filled elevator. Chatters and side comments of his name fill the air, and when Olivia Moore spots him, she flashes back to the night, but knocks herself out of every thought that has to do with that night. However, she can't neglect how fast her heart beats. And at that very moment, Damian Brown sniffs her, immediately looking around for her. Unfortunately, the elevator dings open as people exit, disrupting his search. He orders the cancellation of the press conference, announcing his intent to find her since she is likely to be around the vicinity. Russell suggests that the search be done afterward, to tame the rumors in circulation, which he concurs with, but offers him strict warnings to search the entire building and bring her to him, while he takes care of the conference. Amidst the chattering, Olivia Moore is wrapped in the thoughts of the man from the other night, comparing the striking resemblance between them when a call from a friend of his comes through. He excuses himself immediately, ignoring the conference that has just commenced, and to her greatest surprise, Damian Brown speaks to the public, the man from the elevator and the man from a few nights ago. He continues his speech, bearing good news about the hope of Terra cure to those suffering from rare disease cases, creating a world with hope to live as normal humans. Meanwhile, she watches the screen with hope, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What?" Max screams from the shock of the news about Tommy's whereabouts. The caller informs him of his friend's body lying cold in the morgue, and at this point, he can't get himself together, flinging his phone in a manner that shatters the screen of his poor car. Continuing from before, the conference is quite rowdy, as the press burdens him with loads of questions about Terra cure and its so-called hope. Feeling extremely dizzy, he musters all the strength he can find to get through the conference, already wishing Olivia Moore was by his side to cure his illness. Russell hints to him of her absence from a far end, and he takes it upon himself to find her, especially as he had caught her scent earlier on. Unable to hold himself any longer, announces the Terra cure's lead scientist, who will be in charge of answering their question, exiting the stage at once. Olivia Moore wonders if he is leaving, taking it upon herself to speak to him before he leaves. But when she gets to his office, she is blocked by a security personnel who demands her entry pass. She informs him of her friend who happens to be with it, wondering where Max must have run to. And in the nick of time, Russell instructs another to supply some essentials to Damian Brown. Adding to this, he listens to the conversation between the man and Olivia as she begs for a few minutes with Damian Brown, immediately taking note of her blonde hair. The next scene reveals Damian Brown in his car, sweating profusely as the pain ricochets through his body, and you wouldn't believe what happens next. A body that looks like Olivia's is thrown next to him, and even as her screams are ignored by the masculinities, Russell informs Damian Brown to quit blaming him since he has done his part. At the mention of Damian Brown, she stills, immediately turning to him and wondering what he's doing there. However, he notices the drastic change in his system as everything returns to normal as it did the very first time they had met. He leans into her, pinning her with a stare that makes it hard for her to move, but she gets a grip of herself, expressing her intentions of wanting to meet with him. As expected, the paparazzi trailing after them can pass up for sneaky bastards as they mount the car with their cameras and microphones. "Is she your girlfriend?" one of the men questions, as Russell gets infuriated by them, merely giving a warning about his rusty driving skills before he slams the engines. The scary paparazzi come fully prepared as they get into their cars, brewing for a chase. Meanwhile, Olivia Moore apologizes for the improper position and talks about the illness that threatens to end the life of her daughter. She begs him to include her in his company's clinical trials, but he becomes the bearer of bad news, informing her of the filled slot. Desperately, she begs him for a chance, and he finally agrees, although only if she will cover the cost of $30 million. Knowing fully well her financial state, she begs to do every other thing that he requires of her, But unfortunately, the information-thirst cameramen block his path, making Russell stop his escape schemes, and you wouldn't believe what happens next. He steps out of the car and gives her exactly 3 minutes to win him over. Continuing from before, we catch a glimpse of Damian Brown and Olivia, hiding behind a block while the cameramen look around, wondering where they have disappeared. They make mention of Olivia Moore being a major scoop, mostly because she is a new face in his world, while the duo eavesdrops on their conversation. He inquires if she's done with trying to convince him, and she bites back, stating the 3 minutes isn't up. Coming to a firm resolution, she announces to pay back the money for the rest of her life, but he calmly reminds her of the impossibility, even though she works till the day she dies. Not giving up to his smart mouth, she grabs his shirt and voices something about saving his life, her eyes begging him to reconsider, but the devil's spawn simply informs her of the remaining minutes left. Getting infuriated, she tells him to state his wants, baring herself to him, hypothetically. He is surprised by her guts, making a comment about her body that makes her flip in anger. Notwithstanding, he grabs her waist and whispers about the determination flaming in her eyes. In quick movements, he hoists her over his shoulders and ignores her girly screams and gasps, but he simply informs her to hold tight. And just when you think you've seen it all, he does one of those superhero jumps that gets them to the rooftop. Except his cape appears to be missing. Olivia Moore is the definition of awe, as her head still reels from what she had just experienced. Russell scolds him for being a bit late, but Damian Brown counters him with a suitable reply, and with that they make their way to the airport, not after she had made a fool of herself by mentioning the plane tickets. Finally, on the plane, she beats herself up for ever mentioning the plane tickets, but he disrupts her thoughts, confirming her identity and her willingness to do anything for her daughter. She concurs, but sets a limit to what she can do, which makes him offer her a deal about seeing him. But hold up, before her mind can wander to the nasty part of her brain, he includes, not romantically, but also buttressing his intentions of seeing her quite often on a regular basis. She calls bullshit on his suggestion, and he reminds her of her fraudulent promises to sell her soul and body. Nevertheless, she bites back at him, accusing him of trying to trick her into seeing him. However, he reminds her of her daughter, which makes her rethink her decision, and finally, she agrees to the deal. In another part of the city, Max makes his way to the morgue, where an attendant attends to him, and soon after, Tommy's body is revealed to him. He informs him about his time of death, which tallies with the very day he went missing, sometimes on Saturday evening, also regretting his effortless action in not searching for his friend. Moving on, he questions the wound on his neck, and the attendant informs him of the damage a much more dangerous animal has caused him, inquiring about the possibility of Tommy keeping a dangerous pet. Max simply waves him off, informing him of Tommy's lazy habit of taking care of anything, including himself. A tear falls from his eyes. Placing his palms upon Tommy's, Max is welcomed into a new level of horror when the dead body grabs his hand, causing him to jolt back in fear. Pointing to Tommy's hand, he accuses the lifeless body part of grabbing him, and in turn, the attendant blames it on a post-mortem spasm that happens from time to time. Max seems sure of what he just experienced, but the other informs him to allow the dead to rest in peace as he shows him out of the morgue. Days later, we see Olivia, Minson, and Luna stroll into a gigantic hospital room that could pass for a hotel suite, just like Minson had said. Little Luna questions what she means by a hotel suite, but the lady simply tells her that it's a room filled with candy and laughs out hysterically. Olivia Moore bites at her to refrain from confusing her little brain, although she is finally happy that her daughter gets the treatment she deserves. The brunette screeches when she sees the famous Damian Brown, who just happens to be the talk of the city at all times and seasons. The ladies confirm their familiarity with the name as he talks to a doctor, possibly about Luna. Obviously, after the ugly encounter with the cameramen from the other day, Olivia Moore isn't completely shocked to see a blurred picture of her and Damian Brown splashed across all blogs and tabloids. Minson guesses the blondie in his car is his girlfriend, but Olivia Moore counters her, not accepting the lies, which gives her away as the brunette figures that it's her friend's pictures splashed across the entire internet. Olivia Moore simply tells her to check back later for an explanation when Dr. Allen strides into the room, introducing himself as Allen, who is completely in charge of Luna's treatment. Olivia Moore also introduces herself, even though she can't help but notice Damian Brown's low demeanor. However, Dr. Allen invites little Luna for her first checkup, and the little girl does everything in her power to ensure her mother tags along. Just as they are about to take their leave, Damian Brown demands an audience with Olivia Moore, and she tries but fails to use Luna as an excuse to avoid him when Minson steps in for her and she glares daggers at her only friend. He strides in the direction of his office, and she follows suit. Meanwhile, Minson watches them leave, getting suspicious at their sudden bond, also catching sight of Russell, trying to remember where she had seen the face. Following behind him, Olivia Moore inquires where he plans on taking her, but Damian Brown is lost in thoughts, wondering why his migraine persists even in her presence. Just in time, Max strides into the hall, thinking of how surreal Luna's situation is, especially as his suggestion has gotten them far to an extent. Olivia's voice echoes in the hallway, and he makes an abrupt stop, stepping in the direction of her voice, but you wouldn't believe what happens next. Shock and betrayal flash in his eyes as he beholds the lady of his dreams locking her mouth with the freaking CEO of Terra, or so we think. Prior to the kissing scene of Make-Believe, Damian Brown questions the possibility of some changes occurring in her body in the past few days, knowing deep down that it's the only reasonable explanation as to why he keeps having incessant migraines. Suddenly, he slumps on her, and she panics, questioning if he's all right, but he keeps repeating the question from earlier, even as his body vibrates like a guitar string in motion. Her answers aren't helpful to him, and as a result, he releases her to go to her daughter, but out of concern, she opts to call a doctor. He orders her to leave his presence, and she stomps out angrily, screaming at him to suit himself, and he drops to the floor when his legs are unable to carry his body any longer. Moving forward, he battles calling Russell, but even that proves futile, as his hand drops to the floor. On the other hand, Olivia Moore still reels in anger after he had the guts to get angry at her for being generous. Pondering the real reason he wanted to see her, she hopes he gets well, even though he can be a real jerk sometimes. Fortunately, she bumps into a nurse, laying a complaint about a person feeling unwell, and quickly points her in Damian Brown's direction. With a clear conscience, she continues her journey to Luna's treatment session, but stops abruptly when she spots Max waiting in the hallway. "When did you get here?" she questions, but he ignores her, questioning her whereabouts in the past few minutes. However, she gives him a vague response about doing something, also offering him a cup of coffee. They settle down to discuss the recent happenings with Luna and Terra trial sessions. Max inquires how she got through to Damian Brown, but she shares in the surprise, voicing how lucky she is for such an opportunity to cross her way. He voices out his thoughts, clearly doubtful of the opportunity, and she questions what he means, not appreciating his tone and line of discussion. Moreover, he apologizes, admitting to rambling when exhausted. Switching the line of discussion, she questions his whereabouts on the day of the conference, and he breaks the news about Tommy's death, rendering her shocked to her bones. He admits to being devastated, further stating that he was mauled by a wild animal, and she wonders how something like that would take place in the heart of the city. He bears the same concern, but what really baffles him more is what he beheld earlier with Olivia Moore and Damian Brown, although knowing better than to bring up the conversation. The following scene reveals Turner standing beside a body, just as Silas strides into the room with a new level of arrogance. He questions Silas's reason for coming in late, hoping his excuse won't be related to the lady from the diner, but as expected, Silas confesses to dropping by the diner every single day. Unfortunately, he hasn't seen her ever since the incident, wondering if she had quit her job because of him. But then again, Turner refocuses his mind on the important matters, revealing Tommy's cold body. He screams at Turner's failed attempt yet again, and suddenly something unusual happens. Silas feels a surge of power within him as the lying body turns into a werewolf, and well, Turner celebrates their success, and his first beta in his lifetime. Adding to this, Silas Beta charges at Turner, but before he uses him for dinner, Silas transforms into his beast form, stopping his beta's attempt. Turner shows concern for his beta, but Silas cares less as he revels in the surge of power. Turner makes a side comment about the wolf recognizing his master, questioning how it feels to be an alpha, and informing of the significant boost in strength that only happens when he makes more betas. Silas puts an end to his blabbing, expressing his distrust, although he looks forward to where it leads. "It's a monster!" Yet another human victim screams, and Silas only revels in the great timing as he feasts on his dinner, paying deaf ears to his pleas. Damian Brown has already gotten home. He's resting on his couch in the living room, and there is Russell walking in. Russell is thanking the nurse lady that called him earlier to bring him home, and Damian Brown asks him, in question, who that was. Then he calls her name, Olivia Moore, and then Damian Brown is kind of impressed, but he's not showing it off in his reaction. Anyways, Russell goes ahead to suggest for them canceling an upcoming conference, but Damian Brown declines, saying he is going to try to make it and it shouldn't be canceled. Damian Brown tries to sit upwards, but the side effect of the drugs is getting the best of him. Moving on, Max and Olivia Moore are packing up a little stuff for Luna. She picks up a few things and puts them in the bag. Max picks up a doll and asks if it is going to be of any help. She nods and collects the doll. She proceeds to tell the story behind that particular doll and why it's so precious to Luna. But then again, she just keeps quiet, and then Max holds her hands to reassure her and make her feel comfortable enough to speak up to him. She is about telling the story of how Luna had her first seizure when they hear a knock on the door. Knock, knock. Max walks towards the door to go see who that is. As soon as he opens the door, he sees Damian Brown instead. He is shocked. He asks Damian Brown what he's here for, and he replies, "Moore, is she home?" he asks. Max is pissed because who comes to see someone around this time? He tells Damian Brown to say whatever he wants to say at the door, but Damian Brown refuses to do so. Instead, he questions Max why he is at Olivia's place. Then Olivia Moore steps forward. She invites him inside because the atmosphere is kind of tense. Max is really pissed. You can see that in his body movement. He wonders how they've known themselves this much for him to stop by her place anytime he feels like it. That pisses him off. The more so, he tells Olivia Moore that he's going to go and they can meet up at the hospital. Olivia Moore tries to explain to him, but he just stumbled off. Olivia Moore tells Damian Brown never to show up at her house unexpectedly again. He agrees and asks how she proposes for them to meet. Well, they are going to figure that out. Olivia Moore looks around in confusion, wondering what the papers are for. She questions him about their need, and he informs her of the contract they are to be signing, which explicitly outlines everything contained in the contract, although she wonders if any of that is necessary. However, a line in the contract specifically catches her attention as she reads aloud, "Olivia Moore will comply with all instructions issued by Damian Brown," but he simply tells her that it is what it is, being an extreme jerk by offering her a pen to sign the contract. She refuses to sign it, but looks in the direction of a teddy bear that reminds her of her daughter, and taking a deep breath, she questions if he will do right by her daughter, and he reassures her. Immediately, she snatches the pen from his grip and signs the contract. Nevertheless, he strikes up a conversation about doing something with him, hence the contract is up and running. Olivia Moore is clearly fed up with his unending requests, slamming her poor hand on the innocent table, just to drive her point. He reminds her of the first day they met, tossing his suit jacket on the nearest handle, also questioning where their actions had happened, just as he flips open his buttons. She questions his intentions, and he simply lays out his intent to retrace everything that happened that night. He sits in the same position and grabs her, observing the shirt she wears, and guess what? She changes into the torn change and settles beside him. The duo stares at themselves in an awkward moment, given his instruction, but he finds it strange as he wonders why his body remains the same as it was in the hospital, also wondering about the lack of rainfall. Shifting to a different scene, we see Max all bessed up about Olivia's sudden bond with Damian Brown, thinking of informing her how dangerous he is, but he simply blames himself for suggesting Terra cure for Luna's illness. A call comes through his phone and he picks up but is suddenly infuriated when the caller informs him of Tommy's missing body. The latter apologizes for their inefficiency, further informing him of the measures taken to locate it. Max lets him know that he is on his way, but the caller waves him off. Back at her apartment, Olivia Moore shivers when Damian Brown pulls out a gun, handing it to her to shoot him, even though she refuses. She expresses her disappointment in him, returning the weapon to the tabletop, but Damian Brown wishes she would act accordingly since it's the only way to ascertain her powers. He reaches for the weapon, and when she refuses, he informs her to heal him as she had done before, but Olivia Moore stares at him dumbfounded, wondering what he rambles about. We are shocked when he aims, and Olivia Moore goes to stop him, and fortunately she stops as they drop to the couch, just as it had happened a few nights back. "Are you insane?" she screams at him, inquiring what he's playing at, but he tells her how unnecessary her heroic display is. She pays deaf ears to his joke, pointing at the fact that he could have hurt himself. He offers a response about being not so fragile, further inquiring why she cares so much when she could easily blackmail him. He forms a headline that could make waves on the internet, joking at how sensational the headline is that will sit pretty on her friend's newspaper, dragging Max into the pool of what-ifs. She questions what he takes her for, revealing a piece of herself that might seem hard to believe. She expresses her inability to sit and watch a suffering human, confessing it to be part of the things raising Luna has taught her. Assuming a sitting position, she exposes the reason her daughter had made it this far in the very first place, pointing out the kindness of others, and because of this, she practices the habit of giving back. Furthermore, she expresses the irrelevance of his title, stating the fact that she helped him simply because he was hurt, even though she blames him for regretting her actions, unable to hold back her tears at this point. Confusion etches his features, but before he plays the dumb card, she blames him for disrespecting her, questioning if the inclusion of her daughter in the trials had offended him. However, she doesn't drop the subject, suggesting that it has to do with the woman named Julia, shocking him this time around. She voices how she had taken note of the name the first day they had met, inquiring who she is and her business with Julia, but the series of questions doesn't end there, as she questions a lot of whys. Suddenly, Julia's ghost stares at him and her, his golden eyes shining through the dark as he locks eyes with her. Julia looks down at a sobbing Olivia, even as tears stream down her cheeks. Meanwhile, Damian Brown is completely stunned at everything happening all at once, dropping her to the couch and expressing the need to end things for the night as he stands to get dressed. She questions what he means, but his vagueness is outstanding, simply stating everything they had agreed to, ignoring her entirety, even though she calls after him. Confused, she wonders what has happened at the last minute, but in the grand scheme of bad timing, her phone just happens to ring at the very minute. Hoping it's Damian Brown, she scrambles to connect with the caller. However, her boss from the Moondance Diner greets her as they settle into a healthy, comfortable discussion. The good boss asks about her daughter's health, and she lets him know just how good she is. Continuing the discussion, Olivia Moore apologizes for quitting her job so unexpectedly, but he waves her off, ensuring she takes good care of herself and her daughter, which makes her eyes glisten with unshed tears. Finally, exiting the building, Russell seeks answers to his questions, but Damian Brown unfortunately doesn't satisfy his hunger, also breaking the news of finding an alternative solution. Russell's expression is the definition of confusion when he reminds his boss about the stakeholders' meeting, scheduled for the following, but Damian simply announces his decision to avoid using humans for experiments. The suited blonde head questions the possibility of him being concerned about her, and he flinches, the question lingering in his mind. The next scene reveals Silas going through blogs, simultaneously guzzling down his drink, and suddenly he comes across a recent blog making waves on the internet, one that contains a picture of Olivia Moore and Damian Brown. He wonders who the blonde lady is, hoping it isn't the same one from the diner, since she is also a blondie. Moreover, he wonders why the thoughts drive him to the brim of madness, also making a mental note to stop by the diner the following day. The following morning, Olivia Moore heads to the Terra reception, asking to see Damian Brown, but the receptionist informs her of the impossibility, especially as doesn't have an appointment scheduled. The latter also informs her that he is out of the office but wouldn't tell his location, although she suggests taking a message. Cupping her head, Olivia Moore wonders what to do, knowing the very fact that he won't want to lay his eyes on her, judging by their encounter from the past day. She thinks about her dearest Luna, making a decision to change his mind if she has any plans of saving her daughter at all. And with that, she voices her intent of waiting till he returns from his journey. The drama is just getting started, guys. Want us to continue? Comment Olivia below. Also, to a new scene, we are quite surprised to see Damian holding a bunch of flowers, approaching a cemetery. He stops at an aesthetic-giving grave and begins to pour his heart out. Making mention of the name Julia, the handsome-looking man confesses about the troubles he has been facing lately. Cursing under his breath in an exasperated tone, he finally spills the tea about detecting her scent on a stranger. He has also making mention of his migraine that seems to be at ease whenever he is around her. His thoughts rumble and groan in pain since Julia was the only human who accepted him for who he truly was, which in turn made him fall desperately in love with her smile filling a void in his memory. He thinks about all the years he had spent developing drugs to suppress his werewolf instinct, in a bid to make sure she is never put in harm's way. This led to him dedicating himself fully to the research, even after her demise, as a way to keep her memory burning within him forever, or so he thinks. As if gisting with a mate, his thought spills out the secret of wanting to use Julia's lookalike to perfect his experiment, but the question of resistance rips through him like burning guilt. On the other hand, Russell approaches him with an annoyed look, informing his boss about a stubborn Olivia who persistently waits for his return. The mention of the feminine name tears him out of his emotional fit. Reflecting on something she had told him earlier about possibly being a good Samaritan, he clenches his fist. Wasting no second, he instructs Russell to find out the location of the diner in which her friend works, but Russell's inquisitiveness gets the best of him, even as he questions his boss about the project getting back on with a glint of hope in his eyes. Damian's expression is indifferent, giving him an answer contrary to his thoughts, and he flips, demanding to know his business with the diner, but Damian calmly informs him of the debt he owes Olivia. Moments later, the diner comes into view, with random people going about their day or whatever individuals do in diners, and soon enough, the trio comes into view. It's evident that Damian has already proposed his intentions to Minson to be Luna's babysitter. Going further, Damian buttresses the fact that it will likely be challenging for her friend Olivia to care for the child all day while also looking after him. Meanwhile, Russell wears a curiously confused look as he tries to piece two and two together, wondering why Damian stalls the project when they could treat Luna at once. However, Minson's interest seems to be piqued as she enters a bargaining spirit, announcing her wish to be paid thrice her current salary. Damian is sincerely bored, offering to triple the amount instead, and a loud gasp escapes her mouth as she leans forward, seeming overly interested at this point, although he makes her promise never to breathe a word about their deal to Olivia. Suddenly, she's taken aback, inquiring about the reason, especially knowing fully well that Olivia will be more than happy to come, but he simply cuts her off with his intention to inform her himself. "Whew," she breathes out, brushing off the pang of guilt growing in her chest. But then, out of nowhere, we see Silas staring at them with a sinister look, even though he is quite shocked to see Damian in the diner of all places. Silas becomes more infuriated at his messed-up plan of bumping into Olivia and immediately picks a stone, flinging it with reckless abandon in the direction of the window. Just in time, Damian spares a glance at the window, and almost immediately, a loud shattering sound engulfs the entire diner, just as he moves to protect Minson. Sniffing his surroundings for the threat, he immediately realizes what it smells like, and at that moment, Russell stutters the name Silas in utter shock, also inquiring about his business in the now silent diner. But hold up, Damian's demeanor screams unbothered, just as he sneers at Silas to be done with his great display already, judging by the eyes on them. The raging blondie pays him no heed and charges at him, shoving poor Minson out of his way, who is caught by Russell. Lucky for her. He throws a punch at Damian, but the latter proves to be more energetic, throwing him a punch to the chest, which makes him retreat in quick strides. Unfazed, he warns Silas to get going, reminding him of how incomparable he is to him. However, that only triggers the raging blonde even more, as he decides to show him how much has changed, a sudden surge of energy coursing through him. He lunges at Damian, but as expected, the latter is quick to catch, slamming him to the floor. Damian patronizes his now much stronger strength, squeezing his neck even more just to prove a point. Now a shocking realization has us on tippy toes when Damian informs him to go find a match for his fighting skills, since he is the older brother and the head of the family, making him no match for his strength. Silas goes to say something but is distracted by the two guys taking pictures of the great Damian Brown from a corner. He makes a guttural sound that signifies the incoming danger. Nevertheless, the guys confirm it's their target once again and run for the hills. Russell, Damian groans in frustration, but thank goodness that Russell is already on their heels. On the other hand, Silas refuses to give up the fight, immediately growing claws and lunging at his brother almost immediately. The following scene reveals a car at a high speed, while the guys behind the wheel express their happiness at getting a picture of the country's idol. Also, they talk about selling the snaps out to the highest bidder of the press. The passenger princess drools about their newly found source of income when the car suddenly screeches to a stop, and you wouldn't believe what happened next. The passenger princess screams at him for the sudden movement, but he only points to the cute wolf staring at them from a short distance. In a bid to decide what the animal actually is, with a raging panic, the wolf charges at them, while they scream out their lungs, and pain graces the atmosphere. Meanwhile, back in the diner, Silas succeeds in clawing his brother, soothing the pain that Damian inflicted on his neck. Just in time, his cross-like pendant falls from his neck, and it reminds him of Turner's warning to maintain a low profile, lest their schemes be ruined if his older brother gets even the tiniest info. Moreover, this knocks some sense into him, and for once, he shares Turner's beliefs and silently loathes himself for losing control. Silas warns Damian to stay away from him, but the latter decides to be the voice of reason, reminding him of his family and how they will always be waiting for him to return home. However, Silas tightens his grip around the cross, and at this point, we fear the revealing of yet another flesh wound. But he is oblivious to his scars, reminding Damian of the reason he left the Brown family. Giving his final warning that seems more like a threat, he informs him to enjoy being the head of the family while it lasts, also stating his evil intentions of toppling him while he begs for his last breath. And with that, he exits the diner. Damian is not only taken aback, but is also lost in thoughts concerning the source of his strength, especially as he was weakling on their last encounter. The buzz of his phone rips him off the thoughts of his dramatic brother. The voice on the other end reminds him of Olivia, who is still waiting for his return, and in quick movement, he makes his way to the office. Striding into the almost empty space, he stops at the entrance of his office only to behold his visitor sleeping so calmly, even as she mumbles her daughter's name. Amazed at the fact that she had waited for him all day, he gives it not much thought. Leaning into her, he cradles her like a baby. But the thought of putting her in harm's way, mostly as Silas is on a rampage, gives him a heart attack. And with that, he concludes to end the contract, even though it delays the project. The next morning, Russell burst into Damian's office, disrupting his mini-meeting with his assistants. He mutters something about calling off the stakeholders' meeting and calling his attention to the news headline that reports the incident at the diner. But as usual, Damian acts unbothered while Russell confesses to being oblivious to the other person taking the photo. Moving on, Damian simply states his intention to go ahead with the meeting, and this only makes Russell gasp, even as he questions the possibility of collapsing on the stage, or even worse. In a bid to solve the problem, he advises his boss to bring Olivia along, just in case something happens. The next scene reveals our leading female, standing at the entrance of Luna's room, and she is completely lost in thoughts about the past day's activities. She wears a sad smile at not being able to meet Damian, but also wonders how she ended up in Luna's room, but a voice calls unto her, disrupting her rambling thoughts. Surprised to see Max, she inquires about his business in the hospital, but he immediately cuts to the chase, notifying her of a pressing matter he wants to talk to her about. She signals him to sit, offering him her attention, but then the question that comes next shocks her to her bones. "What's going on between you and Damian?" he questions, and the shock in her voice is evident as she questions what he means. Max begins recounting every event that he saw them together, which leads to his conclusions. But in her defense, Olivia claims she was only lending him a helping hand since he was having a health crisis. She also lets him in on the sole reason he had visited her. Sort of confiding in him, she wishes there is more to their relationship, stating the fact that her daughter might be removed from the trial, thereby ending the contract. To be honest, Max feels her pain as he places his hand on hers to reassure her. However, that doesn't stop him from voicing how dangerous Damian is, backing his story up with the fact that he tried to unalive someone at a certain diner. Olivia offers a shocked look, unable to believe the story, and at that exact moment, Minson strolls into them and counters everything the redhead had just spilled. Being a true witness, Minson explains everything that went down at the diner. But Olivia's head spins from what business Damian could possibly have at the Moondance Diner in the grand scheme of diners. Forgetting the oath she made to Damian to keep their deal a secret, she fills her in on his proposition to make her Luna's babysitter throughout her treatment, and also fills her in on the amount of money he offers for the inconvenience. "Crap," she screams, remembering Damian's unfazed expression as he told her to keep their deal a secret. Olivia, on the other hand, is relieved upon hearing her daughter's treatment live to see another day, though she wonders why he had changed his mind. Wearing a confident look, she spills her intentions of going to talk to him. Nevertheless, Max offers to take her later in the day since he is occupied with the stakeholders meeting, but she is stubborn-headed and highly determined. In another part of the building, the stakeholders meeting commences and we see Russell and Damian exchanging mocking remarks, even as the blondie glares swords at him. Almost immediately, Damian is invited to the stage, and ignoring Russell's desperate whispers, he strides in that direction as sharp flashlights and claps fill the atmosphere. However, we notice something different about Damian's demeanor as he begins to sweat profusely, but that's not all. He staggers a bit, making the host question his health, but he replies curtly, making him recede to his seat. Feeling extremely dizzy, he wonders if he overdosed on his medication, trying his best to act right, and immediately he acknowledges his audience. The press bombards him with questions concerning the diner and his alleged substance abuse. By now, Damian's actions are evident while Russell charges in his direction before he loses control. He talks Damian into maintaining his cool, but it's already too late, just as his breathing becomes even more ragged and his canine teeth reveal themselves. Olivia once again proves to be his guardian angel as she pushes through the door, summoning Damian's attention while Russell is surprised but glad to see her at this point. Rushing to him, Damian inhales the familiar scent as he leans on her, after feeling like drowning for the last couple of minutes. She intertwines their fingers, seeking to know if he is all right, but he only says her name as a response, although knowing fully well that he will be fine, especially as she is with him. Simultaneously, Olivia is a mess, trying to figure out her sudden attachment to him, despite his best efforts to push her away. She knows deep down in her guts that he needs her, and she is the only capable hand he has, and well, the duo returns to their mess of reality as flashlights lighten the entire room. Moving forward, Russell questions his boss's health, to which he receives a positive reply, and in the same vein, Damian instructs Russell to lead Olivia to his office. In a whisper, he instructs Olivia to shield her profile from the flashlight as she makes her way to his office. Nonetheless, he ponders on her selfless act, concluding that it's her personality, and as they stride out of the conference room, a few press members threaten to follow her. Just as they are about to make their way, Damian summons their attention, opting to explain the last couple of minutes. Back in the office, Olivia reads the headlines following Damian's health condition about a rare disease, and piecing two and two together, she traces it back to his migraines. The office door bursts open in a second, Damian's profile fills the entrance, and immediately she demands to know how he feels, and he renders a positive reply, thanking her even. Surprised at his reply, she rejects his compliment, instantly shifting the conversation to the proposition he offered Minson when he already planned on pulling her daughter off the trial list. However, he firmly assures her that Luna will continue with her treatment, even while the contract has been cancelled. Getting intrigued, she inquires about the reason he changed his heart, but his thoughts answer the question, referring to her selfless act from earlier and what she had said some nights ago. He clasps his hands, preparing to tell the biggest lie of the century, although partly true. He states how unsafe she is with him, which results in him canceling the contract, but once again, he reassures her about her daughter's treatments, informing her to consider it his way of returning her kindness. Okay, people, right now, Olivia is in a daze as she stares at him with her green pool, a tint of red staining her cheeks, but before she falls too deep, she springs up to her feet and says her bye. Meanwhile, Damian dissuades her, mentioning the thirsty reporters, but she cuts him off with an urgent need to prepare dinner for her daughter, and with that, she exits the office, ignoring his calls. Shortly after, our leading blondie settles in a corner, silently loathing herself for burning bright red when she repeats her words from nights ago. However, she reels in the thought of his concerns about her when two reporters come into sight, expressing their pain about how slippery the mystery blonde is. They get into a little squabble about her hair color, but he uses Olivia, whose cover has been blown, to describe the mystery blonde. The mystery, already having enough drama for the day, strolls in the opposite direction, and that's when they realize who she is. Shifting to a new scene, we see Max at it with his boss, who insists on him writing something relating to Damian's secret flame, rather than his illness that people don't care about. Max believes that they stick to highlights that will directly affect the stock market, but the bald man mentions something about people loving the hell out of entertainment rather than boring business talks. He suggests that they dig into Olivia's life, but he refuses, stating the fact that the article is being printed out as they speak. Mr. Baldness threatens to fire, but he is already drowned in his thoughts, reflecting on how close they were, also hating his guts for not having the willpower to interrupt them. Nevertheless, Mr. Baldness says something about an outlet publishing a follow-up article about the entire fiasco, and this zaps him out of his thoughts when he scans through the article that exposes Olivia being a family member to one of Terra patients. He also wonders how the information got leaked. As the reporters camp outside the building looking for any source of information, Olivia puts Luna to bed, and a sudden vibration of her phone catches her off guard. Max's voice fills the entire room as he fills her in on the reporter's obsession with her, which might affect Luna's treatment process. He further instructs her not to leave the hospital for the moment, also letting her know that he is willing to assist in any way but she rejects his offer. The redhead pleads with her to let him assist her, and finally she agrees, ending the call at once. Max breathes a sigh of relief, although already scared of losing her if he doesn't do so much for her. The following day, Russell makes his way to the Terra building, engaging with Damian, who glares daggers at the reporters camping outside the building. Russell praises him for his wise decision to address the public about his illness, judging by the fact that his alleged drug use is gradually losing relevance. Damian makes a snarky comment, just as Russell raises his spirit to conquer and rule. These so-called pests, disguised in the form of reporters, flood and bombard him with questions, although they know better than to block his path. Meanwhile, Damian takes the walk of pride and indifference as he strolls into the building. However, a question about Olivia's relative being one of Terra patients gets his attention, even though his expression remains indifferent. He wonders how they had gotten hold of the information, mentally picturing Max as one of the suspects who might have leaked the information. Inside the building, Russell can't help but question how the reporters know jack shit about Olivia. Nevertheless, Damian announces the possibility of having a rat as a worker, deciding to move Olivia and Luna to his penthouse. Speaking of the devil in Damian's books, we see Max and Olivia discussing when the raging CEO slams the door wide open, sending dangerous glares to the redhead. Quite surprised, Olivia questions his business with the side of the building, but he ignores her, instructing her to stand behind him. Nonetheless, we trust Max to never get intimidated by the power-drunken Damian Brown as he questions what his intentions are. Unfazed, Damian questions his knowledge of the scandalous articles his newspaper publishes, flashing samples from his phone. The redhead browses through them, knowing fully well that it's the doing of his editor. Pressing further, he accuses him of leaking information about Olivia, also questioning how much he was offered. At this point, Max feels so disrespected that Olivia defends him, mentioning the fact she had gotten into an elevator with some reporters. However, Damian pays deaf ears to her explanations, instructing Russell to make the area inaccessible to unauthorized personnel, which is anyone not directly involved with Luna's treatment. Max is a furious mess as he screams at Damian, making mention of everything that she will need, but like always, he cuts him off, opting to arrange someone for the domestics. Olivia, who is tired of their back and forth, tells Max that she's fine, but he refuses to believe her, mentioning all the things that show she isn't. Unwavering, he suggests that they quietly exit the hospital using the back door, and Damian displays a show of masculinity, immediately grabbing her due to reflex and offers her the penthouse option. In a manipulative tone, he explains everything she stands to gain by taking his option, also explaining the impossible state she will fix Max if the information of their friendship goes out. Olivia decides not to be the cause of his suffering, since he has already done more than enough for her. She takes in a fast breath and appreciates Max for his help so far, but lets him know that she's in capable hands. Damian doesn't entertain more conversation, spinning on his heels, dragging Olivia with him as she offers the redhead a sympathetic goodbye. Max is irritated, watching the way and manner he pushes her around, but is more concerned about her letting him exert such power over her unless there is more to the situation than she is letting on. He ponders harder. Moments later, we see our leading female having a much-needed alone time, even as she huffs in disbelief over her unbelievable reality. She wraps her head around how complicated things have gotten and seeks solutions from nowhere in particular. As if her life isn't unfair enough, the TV roars to life about her relationship with Damian and a patient under his care, and all she does is stare in shock, wondering if she is the topic of discussion. She wraps her head over the lies told against them when the TV switches off, and only then does she realize his presence. Damian assures her that her identity remains a secret, but she goes to worry about him. Moving on, Damian informs her to give up worrying about him. Yet, she expresses her feelings over the accusations laid against me, mostly as she is the one who pleaded for his help with her daughter. Glaring at her, he questions the need to act foolish for his sake, but gosh, Olivia is so stubborn, countering him and picking up her phone to call Max, muttering words about making an anonymous clarification. Sniffing at her determination, he snatches the phone from her and cajoles her into looking out for herself, since he will be fine. Additionally, he reminds her of their agreement to keep her reporter friend at arm's length, and she goes to say something, even though she can't make any words. He beckons on her to forget about her reality and prepare for her guest. Confusion graces her pretty profile, but at just the right time, "Mommy," little Luna screams as Russell guides her in, and at this point, she forgets her reality and dashes to her daughter, embracing the whole of her. She questions how she had gotten to the location, and Luna relays the doctor's words about spending the day with her. Olivia is filled with appreciation when she holds Damian's gaze. The next scene reveals the mother and daughter having a good time as they have their baths. Luna shows her mum the woolly hat made of foams, and Olivia praises her creativity. She also engages her in a discussion concerning the best part of her day. The youngling describes the steak experience, commenting on how different it was. Meanwhile, Olivia drools about it on the inside, but maintains her cool on the outside. Luna also talks about her fun experience in the car, which Olivia is happy to hear about, of course, but her expression dims at the knowledge of her daughter feeling stuck behind the hospital walls. Internally expresses how glad she felt when she was initially admitted, but now her heart feels heavy because she isn't getting any better. Still, In her thoughts, she remembers loathing Damian for trying to cancel the contract with her, but remembers his actions from earlier. She drops her head to her knees, completely oblivious to the child in need of her mother's attention. She decides to reserve a little faith in him since he is trying to be considerate of her, or so she thinks. Knock knock. She hits the slightly open door and she calls out to him, informing him about a sleeping Luna who should be heading back to the hospital. Walking into the room, she catches a glimpse of the medical devices on the experiment table. Nevertheless, a voice from behind catches her off guard, inquiring what business she has in his room, and she goes to reply to him, but freezes when she sees him, her eyes running the length of his body. She spins her head immediately. Burning bright red, she extends her gratitude for hosting them, and he gladly receives it. Surprisingly, he apologizes for being a major jackass towards her, specifically mentioning the part he wanted her to injure him. Engaging in further discussions, he confesses to acting desperate for a course, using her and Luna as an example. However, he spills how XR he got when nothing was working out, which made him put her to bed when she had fallen asleep in his office. Completely unable to face her. Shocked, she confirms all he just said, hoping they are all lying, but unfortunately, he renders an apology, hoping she isn't upset. Moving forward, she settles beside him, after denying ever being upset, and she starts her speech about being the one chasing him and being helpless if he rejects her. He counters her immediately, reminding her of the contract he signed just to keep seeing her. His words strike a nerve, and she clenches her hand to hide the emotion. Wasting no time, she seizes the opportunity to inquire about his reason for wanting to see her, and he spills the tea about feeling at ease around her, also inquiring about her familiarity with such emotions. But then, Olivia on the other end feels quite the opposite, since her heartbeat only rises to a dangerous level when he is around her. Unable to handle the emotions coursing through her, she clears her throat and confesses to feeling such on their first encounter, since she does not just kiss any man on the first encounter. Surprisingly, he shares the same belief, even though she seems to be in doubt. Nonetheless, he questions the reason he would lie about such. The radio silence is deafening when she doesn't reply, which makes them burst into a laughing fit. Damian is swooped in just by staring at her, even though he knows better than to get more entangled with her. But his body does the exact opposite, as he inches closer to her, brushing some strands of blonde behind her ear. Continuing from before, their heartbeats become relatively loud, even to their hearing, as Damian inches closer to her mouth. Something strikes him, instantly making him withdraw his advances and apologize to her, and hurt flashes across her profile even as she stares at him speechless. "I honestly can't figure you out," she exclaims, giving a speech about the contract fiasco and the fact he pushes her away but reaches out to her at the same time. Too tired to handle his insolence, she inquires his reason for lurking around. And probably for a millionth time now, he apologizes for his behavior. He admits to being a complete mess in her presence, though voicing his intent on putting a stop to his insolence. Feeling sorry, she becomes the voice of reason, talking about honesty and all that. She expresses her feelings about how lonely he is, probably due to the fact he doesn't have anybody to confide in, which better explains his reason for being so reserved and aloof. She goes on and on regarding how good she thinks he is, finally offering herself as his therapist since he already feels at ease around her. She starts to apologize for her incessant rumblings, hence she hasn't been what she preaches, especially since meeting him. But guess what? He allays her fears as he begins his epistle about her personality, highlighting instances where she displayed true selflessness even when the situation becomes extremely challenging. Internally, he expresses fear of being separated from her. Meanwhile, Olivia gets flushed after all he said about her, and his heart begins beating. So loud this time around. Staring at her with shocking intensity, he mutters her name, simultaneously inching close to her face. Too close for comfort. He says something about embracing their messed up selves and engulfs her lips, unable to hold himself any longer. Continuing from before, butterflies flutter in our bellies as we catch sight of our favorite characters in their moment. Damian peppers her with kisses, removing his shirt at the same time, and that is enough cue as they go all intimate with each other. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a sinister, empty building comes into view, and we are shocked to see a wolf feasting on flesh that we would rather stay oblivious to. Silas, on the other hand, gets enraged about the disappearance of every article containing news about Olivia. He is so sure Damian had taken her away from the diner, as he did Julia, and vows to unalive him and every other Brown family existence, and a deafening howl fills the night. Max is the definition of restlessness, as he taps endlessly on the computer, trying to piece together the news of disappearing bodies of the insignificant around the city. Whilst a strange feeling engulfs his chest, he wonders why Olivia hasn't reached out to him, swearing to find out if her involvement with Damian will put her in harm's way. Now, in the midst of all this drama around the city, Damian and Olivia continue to have a fulfilling time. "Mr. Brown," she calls out, but he corrects her, informing her to call him by his first name, which does, of course, as soft pants and pleasure noise fill the entire room. Later that night, she feels a tongue lounging on her flesh, and she wakes up to behold a wolf glaring at her. Moreover, in a bid to scream, she jolts awake. "Foo," she breathes out, although pondering on the choice of a dream, taking a quick glance at Damian's built back, even as she reminisces in its realness. Realizing herself, she palms her hair and wonders how she had ended up in Damian's bed of all places, and just as he turns, she flinches, pretending to be asleep. Damian finally sits up after taking the longest stretch and glances at her bare back, pulling the covers over her. But then her alarm makes a wise decision to go off, and she pretends to just be waking up, her green pool clashing with Damian's golden ones. Awkwardly, they scoot further away, creating a huge gap between them. He questions about her nights, but Olivia's thoughts are a mess, reminiscing about their experience from the past night, which makes her go a darker shade of red. Getting a reality check, she announces their ill-timed relationship and the need to check up on her daughter, although demanding comfy clothes just before she leaves the room. The following scene reveals the trio feasting on a delicious breakfast, and Luna announces that she's done, but Olivia is buried deep in her thoughts, wondering why Damian seems unaffected. She blames her emotions on her overthinking ability, yet still overthinks it. Luna screams to get her mother's attention, cradling her face and inquiring about her health status. Olivia's smile is warm as she engages her daughter in a conversation, and we trust Luna to be a little dramatic as she accuses her mother of overfeeding her. Olivia apologizes for the world's peace and makes mention of her medicines, immediately making her way to get them. This reminds Damian of his medications, though he wonders why he feels so light, also wondering if spending the night with Olivia is the cause. Nevertheless, he refrains from jumping to conclusions, since it remains unknown to him what might occur if he doesn't take them. However, it suddenly dawns on him that he might never let Olivia out of his sight, but Luna's voice rips him out of his depth. The youngling inquires about his health status, making mention of having a strange illness like her, and he admits to it, engaging her with his sad childhood experiences to which she relates. With a fallen expression, she expresses her craving for an amusement park, and a sudden spark in his eyes makes him promise her whatever. Olivia returns to the dining room to see them whispering, taking note of her daughter's brightened demeanor as she nods and pinky promises. Getting suspicious, she questions what they are going about, and Luna announces its secrecy. Simultaneously, the click of a silhouette heels catches our attention, as the mystery brunette catwalks to the door and rings the alarm. Soon after, Damian and Lady Mystery discuss something at a distance while Olivia is seen in an overthinking fit yet again. She wonders who the lady is, taking in her fancy style and chic outfits, and also the fact that they seem close, judging from their body movements. Shaking everything related to Damian off her head, she distracts herself with Luna's trip back to the hospital, even though her daughter refuses to move an inch, now paying intense attention to the book she is reading. Almond immediately, Damian summons her attention and fills her with the reason he had invited Sarah, the mystery lady. Confusion etched in all areas of her face. She mentions returning to the hospital, and he tells her to relax, knowing fully well that the reporters are still in search of her. However, she refuses Sarah's help, expressing her ability to handle herself, but Damian presses further, and Sarah takes the cue to invite her into the dressing to take her measurement. Clearly annoyed, she strides past Damian, who makes a pointed comment to see her when he returns, even ignoring his entirety. Back in the dressing room, Sarah pries into her relationship with Damian, seeking to know if they are romantically involved, but she simply states that they are acquaintances, even though Sarah doesn't buy it. She smells Damian's odor all over her, but Olivia's voice cuts through her thoughts, voicing her observation between Sarah and Damian's close relationship. Sarah chuckles and accuses her of lacking self-awareness, making a snarky comment about personal shoppers, girlfriends, and whatnot. Furthermore, she apologizes for the late introduction, formally introducing herself as Damian's cousin, and this shocks her since she clearly misunderstood their relationship. The conversation persists, with Sarah questioning her naiveness to the brewing relationship, and Olivia replying with a hint of defense since he hasn't asked her on a date. Inasmuch as Sarah loves her cousin, she swears he is naive even though he masks it by playing cool. Tapping her phone, she announces her successfully sent measurement and hurries her to go prepare. Shifting to a different location, the trio are seated in the showroom of a luxurious brand, gawking at the models doing their thing. Olivia tries to hide her excitement, which makes her 3 times darker than the normal shade of red, while Luna squeals joyfully with reckless abandon. Sarah enjoys the look on their faces but proceeds to the next course of action, which is inquiring about her favorite brand. The blondie confesses to knowing nothing about brands, as she mentally tries to guess the price of an item. Sarah shows her a sample outfit, urging her to try it on, and the party starts, as tries on some of the outfits. Back in the comfort of the penthouse, Sarah commends her for being a lavish spender, which technically Olivia isn't informed that in Sarah's dictionary, pretty and buy it are greatly similar, although she now realizes this. The personal shopper also repeats Damian's exact words to buy her whatever she likes, and this only makes her grow softer towards him. Later that night, Damian and Russell stroll into his living room when his phone chimes with notifications from Sarah. She sent him some pictures of his new fantasy, but only the picture taken with Luna amuses him more. And Russell can't help but get suspicious when he sees his boss smiling for the millionth time. Olivia, who is lurking in a corner, calls out to him, and on looking up, something called desire shines through his eyes as he takes in her new look. She expresses her discomfort with the outfit, asking him something similar, but he doesn't reply, as his entire thought is fixated on her. Calling out to him again, he returns to reality, trying but failing to put on an indifferent expression. However, he compliments her, also taking note of the sweet scent he sniffs from her. It strikes him that she doesn't smell like Julia, wondering when the switch took place. Additionally, Olivia states her intentions to undress, but he stops her, offering to take her out, even though the expression on her face gives away the question she asks. He ensures she doesn't waste her outfit, also making mention of the scarce reporters at the hour. Still, he opts to rent a place for them, or whatever tickles her fancy. A certain youngling comes into view, suggesting they visit the amusement park, and all efforts she makes to put her daughter to bed appear useless, as Luna insists on playing the princess going for rides. Damian contacts the venue, announcing the coming of the doctor, all in a bid to soothe Olivia's worries, mentioning the promise he made to Luna when she tries to talk him out of it. Fast-tracked to the park, Luna happily runs to a booth, while Olivia looks around, still in awe at Damian renting an entire park. Following her daughter into the booth, she questions the little child concerning the promise he had made to her, and she spills everything she had told him about growing up lonely, which has resulted in him fulfilling her dream of visiting the amusement park. However, she spills that it is a deal he was willing to fulfill if only she listens to the doctor, and Olivia stares at him with a pitiful look. Furthermore, she does something unexpected, running towards him and grabbing his hand to join them in the swing. He willingly follows them, and they have a fun-filled night, even though at one point he gets a little bit nauseous. Stepping off the swing, she mouths her observation about his demeanor, but he waves her off, voicing how fine he is. Still, Olivia thinks that he isn't good with rides, though she doesn't say. Meanwhile, he knows fully well that he must have sniffed something. She offers him a handkerchief to wipe his sweaty face, which he takes with gratitude, but seizes the opportunity to apologize for the way he had left earlier, ignoring the fact she was upset. She knows it isn't his fault, but before she can come up with a reply, Luna runs up to her with tears. The doctor advises that Luna takes a break from her adventure, but Luna, on the other hand, insists on playing the ride, ignoring her mother's pleas to find another fun activity. Damian steps in as a savior, pointing at a game that immediately intrigues the child. He guides her on how to play the game, and shortly after, they all shout in victory as the balloon bursts into pieces, and he compliments her good work. Luna is too excited and erratic, hugging Damian's big stature while suggesting that her mom play one more time to win the teddy. She refuses, but he assures her, and with renewed energy, she targets the balloon. However, he stands behind her, intending to show her the ropes, but she feels flutters explode in her stomach while he takes in her scent. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a man drags his injured body from his crashed car, and as he cries for help, a wolf jumps out of nowhere and feasts on the poor soul. Although something catches our sight, the battered man's ID, which happens to be a worker at Terra, just when you think you've seen the last of Silas. The night slowly comes to a wrap when we see the lovebirds. However, Luna sleeps so soundly on Damian's arm while they talk about how worn out she is. She chuckles, pointing to the Mickey Mouse band on his hair, and he makes a comment about Luna, insisting he keeps it on, which only makes her laugh even more. She accuses him of taking things too seriously, but he only leans into her, suggesting she helps him take off the hand, and a moment of silence passes as they stare at each other. Feeling grateful, she extends her gratitude for the fulfilling night, especially what it meant for Luna. Damian, on the other hand, can't help but sniff the scent, even as he pieces 1 and 2 together, figuring that her powers are at full manifestation whenever she's in a good mood, finally recalling why it remained dormant when he tried to force it out of her. Knowing how helpful the information is for the project, he reaches for his phone to contact the research director at Terra, nevertheless chooses not to ruin the mood, focusing his entire attention on her. The following day reveals Minson at a feast, fulfilling her day's dream as Olivia urges her to take her time savoring the delicacies. The brunette teases her regarding her choice of words and outfit, saying something about being the lady in charge, which Olivia counters, of course, after turning a dark shade of red. She pries further, asking about the Damian's situation, but she doesn't exactly give her a straight reply, and that's all she needs to squeal in excitement, repeating what she has been saying from the onset. Once again, we trust Olivia to shut her up, playing the "I will leave when it's all over" card, and the joyous expression on Minson's face drops. She inquires what she's going on about, and the blondie simply informs her about the article Damian had taken down, starving the public of major news in Terra. Furthermore, Olivia repeats what Damian had said about leaving too early, which puts a mischievous spark on Minson's face as she analyzes what Damian had meant, listing all the things he had done for her in the past few days. Making sense of everything her friend has said, she decides to question his true intentions. Immediately, her phone buzzes with a picture of her admiring the amusement park, and that is all she needs to zoom into her thoughts, replaying the moment. Flashing back to the park, she questions if Damian had unknowingly taken her picture, also asking to see what he took. She stared at the picture with mixed feelings, finally complimenting it, but his comment about viewing her as the picture rang a bell upstairs. Back in reality, she shoots a quick text to him, inquiring when he will be back home, and he replies immediately, informing her that he is on his way. Shortly after, he strolls inside the house and replies to her shocked expression, admitting to leaving the office immediately after he got the message. She scolds him for taking it too seriously, but he replies curtly with an indifferent expression. Nevertheless, she cuts to the chase, telling him about the scandal that has blown off, suggesting she moves out of the penthouse. Feeling uncomfortable, he inquires if she has a problem, which she says no, and then he suggests she stays for her daughter's sake, stating the fact about reporters on the lookout for new gist, and the difficulty in going back and forth with her daughter. Bearing out her chest, she questions if she isn't a constituent of a nuisance, but he shocks her, confessing how better he feels since her arrival. Quite intrigued to know why, spills how comfortable she feels around him, bringing back the memories of their past discussion. For that reason, she agrees to stay a bit longer, asking for the keys to her apartment just in case she needs whatever. On the other hand, we are shocked to see Russell eavesdrop on their conversation, wearing a dismayed look. Moments later, the mother and daughter walk into their room, which now contains all the stuff from their former apartment, and Luna squeals with excitement, while Olivia is lost in wonderment. Damian makes his way to the room, breaking the news about moving their stuff at dawn. He also informs her to get used to the penthouse, taking it as her home when she tries to question his goodness. Meanwhile, Olivia's mind is a battleground, wondering if she should get used to his unending goodness, although feeling kind of bad for getting into his space. Minson's words from earlier threaten to surface, but she pushes them behind her mind when her phone rings with the name Max flashing on the screen, stealing her attention entirely. Excusing herself, she answers the call, exchanging pleasantries, but the panic in his voice raises her curiosity. He raises an alarm about calling the police for the sake of her house, which seems broken, judging from the empty space. Smiling at his oblivion, she informs him of what Damian has done, and this makes him seize his rumbling as he questions the reason. She says something about being watched and keeping a low profile, and he can't help but wonder if he is going to ever let her go. After a brief silence, he suggests that they meet somewhere close to the penthouse since they haven't had any conversation in a while, also announcing something he had to give her. After the call, she seeks permission from Damian, who shockingly allows her to go, although intending to drive her to the destination. Typical Damian. Olivia releases a sigh of relief, just as she hurries to dress, and Damian informs Russell of his plans, which only makes him stare at his boss strangely. Moments later, the sky thunders and releases its tears, and we see Damian watching her from his car as the memory of their first encounter resurfaces, and what would have been his fate if she didn't save him that night. Drowning deeper in his thoughts, he recalls so many instances. She has been a savior, approaching a conclusion that it's the reason he won't be able to let her go, or see her with someone else. He makes a move to return her umbrella before the rain starts properly, but catches sight of Max as he strolls into the diner, obviously glaring daggers and swords at him. Back inside the diner, Max compliments her while settling down, and she reciprocates the energy, although feeling quite awkward. After a moment of silence, she goes first, apologizing for the way she had left him. Nevertheless, he stops the pity party, taking the blame for the article part, and getting a bit curious, he questions her mode of transport in getting there. She confesses to Damian's help in showing and bringing her to the spot, still informing him of a grumpy Damian waiting outside. Shocked, he reveals his thought of him threatening her, but she waves him off, announcing it's her decision due to how unsafe it might be for her and Luna. She also commends his hosting skills, which makes Max finally bare his mind concerning how he feels toward Damian. He accuses the CEO of having bad intentions toward her, and this catches her attention and wonders why he holds the belief. She appreciates the redhead for his care, but defends Damian and his goodwill, stating how helpful he has been to her and Luna, but then he has no choice but to see things from her angle. Shifting the discussion about him, he fills her in on Tommy's case and the need to arrange a befitting funeral whenever he fits the body. She offers her support, making mention of the time he went all out for her and Luna, which makes him wonder when their relationship had diminished to that alone. Moving forward, Olivia reminds him of what he urgently needs to give her, and he simply informs her that it was just a ploy to get to sea, though he hands her a few of her stuff, which he extracted from the hospital. A few moments later, they wait under a shelter, even as Max offers to get her an umbrella, and when she goes to respond, Damian appears from nowhere with an umbrella, shutting her up. He questions how their mini meetup went, after which they exchange a brief pleasantry and goodbyes. He takes note of her demeanor, questioning if the reporter had come bearing bad news, but she waves him off, suggesting that they head straight home. Damian suggests that they use a change of scenery, inquiring if she has anywhere in mind, and of course she comes clean, though not after wondering why he cares so much about her. The next scene reveals the Moon Dance diner, with Olivia making some hamburgers when Damian comes up beside her, offering help. "Almost done," she announces, which makes him stand close to her instead and choose to interrogate her concerning her past. He questions how long she worked, and she replies, mentioning about 5 years, coupled with the fact that she had met her best friend and bonded with her daughter in the diner. Furthermore, he questions her intentions of bringing him over, and she simply informs him of how comfortable she feels talking with him, also asking him the question she had asked him back in her apartment. She repeats the questions, hoping to get an answer, but at the same time starts the "if it's hard for you to answer" speech. However, he cuts her off, recounting the experience of how it all started. He explains that he had a splitting headache, which exposed him to too many painkillers that later made him end up in an unfamiliar alley. He confesses to having gotten into a fight with some thugs and ended up getting shot. He also admits to having been hallucinating due to the severe injury, which made him call her Julia, but she pries further, demanding who she is. He informs her about the woman he loved in the past, and a visible tic flexes his jaw when he announces her death. Similar to the pain, she wonders how she never knew of it. Continuing his heartbreaking story, he explains why he had disappeared, as he couldn't risk anyone disclosing his condition to the press. He also teases her about having a good heart, questioning her satisfaction with the discovery, and she thanks him for his honesty, wishing that they get to know each other like a normal human. Adding to this, she announces the readiness of the delicious burgers, although mentioning her need to add the sauce, which he opts to help. Admiring his clumsiness, she watches him suffocate the sauce bottle until its contents are everywhere, including their clothing. Cupping her chin, he inquires if she's okay when a sound from the storage room catches their attention. Going into the mood of her Russian protector, he pushes her behind him, hoping that it won't be a wolf, but an innocent human. And just in the nick of time, her boss reveals himself. Calling out to each other at the same time, he drops what he carries and strides to Damian, grabbing him by the collar and accusing him of being her cheating husband. She tries to talk her boss out of it, but her lover doesn't allow her to get close, demanding that the elderly man release him. He accuses her of leaving her sick daughter wherever, while having a good time with her so-called cheating husband, and only then does she reveal that her husband had died way before Luna was born. She apologizes for not telling him sooner, since it's a tough topic to discuss, but the boss plays it cool, apologizing for his reaction. Meanwhile, Damian wraps his head around his recent discovery, even getting annoyed about the difficulties she has faced. He swats his hand from its captor, just as the boss questions his identity, and her reply slaps the indifference off his face. She announces that he is her landlord. Turning, she whisper talks to him about living in his house, but he doesn't take that, wishing she used something else apart from that. Scratching his bread, the boss swears to have seen similar actions in movies, judging by how close their faces are. He imagines what the love story will look like, but clears his throat and questions Damian about his financial status, which the latter admits to being fortunate. He also asks him a question about not hurting Olivia, which he confidently replies, the both of them ignoring Olivia's panicked questions. After brief scrutiny, the boss confesses to liking Damian's personality, also inquiring where she had met him. Desperate to switch to a different topic, she quickly observes the diner, asking why it's locked, and he fills her in on the incident, mentioning Terra cure folks and threatening to teach them a lesson whenever fate decides he runs into them. On the other hand, Damian offers to fix the busted window, an offer he happily accepts and opts to prepare a cheesecake for them as he retires into the storeroom. Phew! Olivia releases a starved breath, touching her chest for dramatic effect, as she explains how lucky he is not to be recognized by the boss because he isn't a news watcher. However, he brings up the issue of her calling him a landlord, and she confesses that she is out of options. Nevertheless, he gives her a better answer, saying something about being in the talking stage of their relationship, and she welcomes the idea when his phone buzzes. In the next scene, we see our male lead walking behind Russell as he questions the urgent matter. The blondie questions his intention with his newfound love, and he simply spills his plan to keep her in the penthouse. This aggravates him even more as he queries him about developing the new drug, but he maintains his cool, making a snarky comment about it, also revealing the effort he has made so far with the research director. But then, the blondie cuts him off, obviously not convinced enough, and informs him of how wrong the time is to be flirting with her, repeating the same words he had overheard from earlier. Moving on, he beckons him to take in the scene before him while he is out fooling with a human woman. He approaches the scene with care, the suspicious cops acknowledging his presence as he moves past the caution tape. The scent of human blood is evident in the atmosphere as he sees the corpse of the poor human. A cop stands beside him, explaining the situation of the body when it was found, and judging by the way it's severed in the neck region, Damian knows that it's the handiwork of his kind, a wolf. The cop also informs him of the dead bodies mauled by wild animals found all around the city, and the efforts they have made to dispatch more patrol officers. Damian questions the possibility of him not being the first victim, and Russell finds the corpse's ID, which has the Terra inscription. Damian's mood falls flat as he mentally pieces the situation around him, wondering if ending the man's life was an intentional act. He needs answers, bringing to light information about all wolves living in the human world, affiliated with a specific family, and in return to being watched by the family head, they receive a drug known as ISP. Though there have been a few stubborn-headed wolves that have slipped through the crack, they never dare to unalive a human, or they will endanger their lives. Bearing that in mind, he wonders if Silas has a hand in the recent happenings, and Russell disrupts his thoughts, repeating everything that the research director had said about the ISP. He briefly explains that the ISP is a drug made from the werewolf-killing wolfsbane, so the more their kind takes it, the more poison accumulates in your system, which, unfortunately, makes a person ill over time, triggering the wolf instinct as the body deteriorates. Russell makes reference to Damian's health just before he encountered Olivia. He speaks on behalf of all his kind who suffer similar health challenges, urging his boss to develop the drug as soon as possible, even if it means using his newly found love. Damian states the fact that he can't experiment on Olivia without her knowledge, as he would be deceiving her, but Russell shakes him vigorously, as if shaking off some senselessness, and screams at him to stop worrying about her. He reminds him of what will befall them if the humans find out about their existence. He announces his intention to take her to the research director, since he won't need his permission but his efforts in developing the new drug. He calmly tells Damian the truth about him deceiving Olivia, which he will have to continue unless he wants his health status to deteriorate. He pushes Russell's hand off him, as he has heard enough, and orders the cops to get a morgue for the body and call his attention upon noticing anything suspicious. Just before he exits the scene, he orders Russell to call for a family meeting and interrogate the drug refusers, since they are the ones who likely get into trouble. As he leaves, Russell screams at his back about the need for a new drug, and he nods in response. Transitioning to the next setting, we are captivated to see two wolves with sinister red eyes fight each other when a voice commands them to stop. Silas stands before the animals with some type of bottle as he decides the winner, kicking the loser wolf. Another stupid bet? Turner's question fills the atmosphere, making a joke about his beta's disobedience. He accuses Turner of being wishy-washy, bragging about his 30 betas fit enough to take down the older Brown. Turner, a bit amused, gestures at him to take a good look at his crazed betas, hinting that it's not enough to take down the Browns. Tightening his fingers on the bottle, he seeks a solution which Turner proffers, of course, being the brain box of their pact. He talks about what Damian is onto, making mention of the family meeting that is scheduled just as they had planned. Continuing the discussion, he advises Silas to get the anti-Damian squad to his side, as some of them will try to do something stupid like check on his health status. A little bit confused, he questions the possibility of that happening, and the priest simply tells him to show who the true alpha is. This gets him excited, even as he shatters the bottle with little to no strength. The next scene reveals Damian striding toward Olivia's room, hoping she has gotten home safe. He opens the door after knocking, but is shocked to see Olivia awake, rather than tucked under the bed covers. He glances at the TV with a bored eye, questioning what she watches when he spots a bear with clothes. She confesses to watching an anime with Luna, who is now soundly asleep, informing him of the cheesecake she has saved for him. He palms his head when Russell's voice resurfaces, which makes her worried as she questions what is wrong with him. He gives a vague reply about being tired, and she suggests that he should go rest or something. But a sudden realization strikes him about having no side effects, despite her sour mood and the ISP he took before coming home. Prying further, he asks how she feels, and she calmly explains how worried she was about him rushing out of the moon dance in that manner, and reminding him of the cheesecake she wants to share with him. Piecing observations together, he notices that her ability manifests whenever she is worried about him. He inquires if she has been upset, but she waves it off, repeating how urgent the meeting might have been. Taken aback, he questions why she is worried about him and not herself, and she points out how unnecessary it was for him to have his assistant accompany her. The following day, Olivia and Luna sit in the dining room while having a sumptuous breakfast, even though she can't help but think of Damian. She wonders if he still sleeps, remembering the way Luna had woken up with a wild look in her eyes when he tried to kiss her. Wondering if something is wrong, she questions the housekeeper about Damian's breakfast, as she seems to clean up the table, and she immediately informs her of Damian's early meeting. The following scene reveals men of calibers assembling at the meeting, as Damian cuts to the chase, announcing the disturbing information of wild animal attacks on the human race. He encourages them to keep their eyes on the ISP refusers, but a man, who is certainly not pleased with Damian's words, arises and questions his say. He pins the attacks on a mere dog, accusing him of instigating news that isn't yet certain, also saying something about having an ulterior motive. But then, Damian isn't about to take his insolence, as he calmly informs him to settle down, but the man pushes more buttons, questioning him about his hallucinating abilities, which makes Russell pity him already. Adding to this, the brown-suited man doesn't give up, repeating the news about his illness, and also wanting to know who will take the ISP drug after hearing the news of almighty Damian Brown going nuts. Russell sneers at him to watch his mouth, but the man insults his position as a beta. Damian stands and screams at the nagging man while shattering the plate before him with a knife. He orders him to sit down, his patience growing thin, but the man doesn't take the hint, accusing Damian of threatening him. A thundering voice filters into the room, repeating what Damian has said, but he chooses to get smart-mouthed with Silas, which lands him on the ground with busted lips and a broken nose. A bit surprised, Damian questions his business in the meeting, and Silas announces becoming the head of the family. The man with a broken nose recovers as he makes a mental note to inquire about more information. Meanwhile, Damian comments about being a head and not an alpha. Suddenly, a hand from nowhere punches him, and Silas announces also making his own betas. He questions the possibility. Instead, Silas throws another punch, but he blocks it, kicking him to reckless abandon. Pinning him on the wall, he holds his neck, questioning him about the missing humans. Silas, on the other hand, questions his source and denies the fact that he had ended the lives of some humans. Rather, he accuses him of ending Julia's life. A human. Getting smart-mouthed, Silas talks about Julia being old news and makes the terrible mistake of mentioning his newly found lover. Damian only sees red at this point, as he tightens his grip on his neck, slamming him to the wall, though even more badly this time around, which causes a red liquid to spill out of his mouth. Reality dawns on Silas as he finds it more difficult to breathe, and he claws at his brother to ease the tension on his neck, but Damian is truly out of control, just as he warns his brother about Olivia. Russell rushes to the brothers, pleading with Damian to control himself, and with that, he lets go of his brother, who drops to the floor like a sack of potatoes. He examines his boss's wound, informing him to go for treatment and ignoring the scrutinizing looks of the remaining heads. And just when the security is summoned, Silas breaks through the window, running for the hills. Back in the car, Damian palms his head, trying and failing to calm his nerves, even after he has taken his meds. He notifies Russell of the need to go somewhere else, as Olivia and Luna are back in the penthouse, but the blondie reminds him of having Olivia by his side for better healing, and he screams a wild, "Not now," groaning in pain. He remembers how damaged he is, rather staying oblivious to what will happen if he shows his true form to his lover and her child. He simply informs him to contact Sarah and instruct her to get them to safety. Shortly after, Russell helps Damian onto the bed, suggesting he calls the doctor. But he stops him, saying something about calming down first. He immediately changes his mind, letting the blondie that he is better off alone even though he doesn't share the same thoughts, dashing off to look for help. Having the room to himself, Damian tries to gather his thoughts, just as he begins undoing his buttons. However, he feels a hand on his, as Olivia takes over the buttons, and he wonders how she had gotten into the room. Then again, her scent fills his nose, and her presence becomes so surreal, as he clearly remembers instructing Russell to take them to safety. He wonders if he's dreaming about her even in a situation like such, feeling something proud that he can do whatever his heart desires. At that moment, he kisses her, but she feels his chest, remembering his wound and informing him of the wrong timing of their romance. Shutting her up, he pulls her to him, kissing her even more, even though he ponders over the realness of his dream. As he basks in the pool of her scent, he feels his wound healing, and that is when he realizes that it's his reality. He loathes himself for putting Olivia in danger. Meanwhile, Olivia is worried sick about him, seeking to know what happened to him, but his reply is shocking. He announces the need to be alone, but she doesn't take the hint, offering to call the doctor, but he stands by his word, asking her to leave, which she does, though telling him to get some rest. Resting behind the door, Olivia thinks about Damian's hot and cold attitude towards her, wondering if it is due to her prying for information, but brushes it off with the fact that he is in a lot of pain to think straight. Russell walks towards her, inquiring about the Damian situation, and she explains that he seems not to know her at first, but currently back to his senses, and a suspicious spark shines in his eyes, as he confirms the suspicion of needing her for the new drug. Olivia accuses him of scaring her earlier, judging by the way he had taken Minson and Luna out of the penthouse, and urged her to go check on him. Russell blows a lie about Damian needing her, though she doesn't feel that way. Moreover, he doesn't give her time to think things through, informing her about the research carried out on Luna's body, which has yielded something unusual that might be the key to curing her illness. Olivia doesn't hide her excitement, but he goes further, proposing to check her body for similar attributes. She doesn't give it a thought due to excitement, even as he offers to drive her to the lab, assuring her about Damian's health, given that his doctor is on his way. Fast forward to the hospital. Russell introduces her to Dr. Aiden, who is the head of the Terra pharmaceutical lab. Olivia exchanges pleasantries with the doctor, oblivious to the environment around her. The gentlemen excuse themselves for a quick discussion, in which Russell urges him to quickly check her, but the doctor questions Damian's whereabouts, and the blondie simply lets him know that it's a secret between them, as long as it is successful. The doctor is not totally convinced, informing of Damian's rule to seek her consent, but then again, Blondie brushes it off with the fact that she is oblivious to being used. Moving forward, Russell assures the doctor that Damian will change his mind with time. But guess what? The doctor's still not convinced, informs them to wait a little while he fetches his supply. Instead, he goes into a far distance and contacts Damian, spilling the tea about Russell's escapades. Shortly after, the duo waits for the doctor's signal. Meanwhile, Olivia feels down for having divided attention when all attention should be on her daughter. Russell glances at his watch, already getting annoyed at the doctor's laxity when a figure in the hallway dries the liquid in his mouth. Damian stomps the hallway with determined strength, stopping in front of Olivia as he announces his plans to take her away, hence she doesn't belong there. However, Olivia is tired of being pushed around, refusing to leave with him since she came because of Luna in the very first place. Even repeating the exact words Russell had told her, but Damian denies the information, saying there's no such thing. He pleads with her to go home with him, but she refuses, needing an explanation of everything going on, and immediately turns to Russell to repeat everything he had told her. Damian is quite aware of Russell's plans, announcing the fact that he is mistaken, and she confirms from the blondie, but the sneaky bastard throws Damian under the bus, announcing that it was first-hand information from Damian himself. Betrayal flashes in her eyes as she accuses him of hiding a lot from her, questioning if she is worth any explanation. Damian, on the other hand, makes an effort for her to see things from his angle, but she only for his answers concerning the wound from earlier and Russell's lies. Olivia walks out of his presence when he can't form words. Nevertheless, he succeeds in grabbing her hand as he begs her to wait. He questions where she is off to, but she decides to hide that from him, making a sad comment about honesty and feelings. Chuckling, Russell questions his reason for staying behind, and before he can utter one more word, Damian pounces on him and screams at him for playing games with his lover. Russell, on the other hand, is unfazed, reminding him of the truth about his younger brother, ending his life if not for her help. He confesses to acting for the greater good, but the raging CEO reminds him of doing whatever to her by himself and dares him to lay his hands on her for a second time, promising him a bloody end. Standing in front of her former apartment, Olivia rummages through her pocket but recalls giving the keys to Damian, unfortunately. "I feel stupid," she whispers, not able to stand upright as she falls to her knees, wondering if she is overreacting, mostly as he doesn't owe her any explanation whatsoever. Basking in the pain of her husband's death, she only takes precautions to avoid the past repeating itself. "Olivia," Max's voice fills the hallway, and he questions what she's doing on the floor, and she immediately cooks something up about forgetting her keys, also inquiring if he has a spare key to her apartment. Wondering if something happened between her and Damian, he gives her a positive reply but invites her to his house, since hers is completely empty. She refuses his help, remembering the way they had parted in the cafe, but he tells her not to take it the wrong way, his offer still standing. He confesses feeling bad about having to leave her outside, and she pushes through the door just as he announces for her to make herself comfortable. He suggests ordering pizza for dinner. Instead, she apologizes, and he questions why. She confesses to always ending up getting his help, but he brushes it off, stating the fact that it makes him feel better. She explains that she will be heading back to the penthouse soon enough, thanking him for offering to order dinner. Makes calls unto her, seeking sincerity as he questions if she is cool being around him, but she mentally answers his question, silently loathing herself for expecting too much from him. But the sound of bangs on the door disrupts their conversation, as they both wonder who could be at the door at such an ungodly hour of the night. He tells her to stay still, while he goes to check, but lo and behold, his editor screams at him for not answering his phone. He nags Max for sitting and doing nothing while he has a story to cover, but the redhead simply asks his business, coming down to his apartment. And that is where all hell breaks loose. Mr. Baldness threatens to fire him unless he finds out everything he can concerning Damian Brown's new women, and Olivia's green pool shimmers with unshed tears as she hides in a corner. Max isn't backing down from the fight as he defends Olivia, stating the fact that she has been scarce the past few days, which the editor surprisingly agrees with, saying something about the said lover disappearing into thin air. He also comments on Damian getting bored with her since he is surrounded by so many women to last him a lifetime. The redhead proposes to the baldhead to give up on her, and the latter even goes ahead to call her a gold digger. In a bid to defend Olivia, Max says something contradicting, but does well to hold himself, and that earns him a suspicious look from Mr. Baldhead, just as it strikes him that they had attended the same conference that birthed the scandal. In order to save his head, he comments about Damian having better taste in women and people in general. Mentally, piecing 1 and 2 together, he smells something fishy with him, glaring at him with true hatred. Meanwhile, Max feigns innocence, praying his editor buys it, which he luckily does. Giving up, the editor instructs Max to come in early the following day, but the redhead announces his plans of coming to work after, since he will be attending a friend's funeral. The editor questions the possibility of other of his friends showing up, and he confirms it, making him smile in a sinister manner, even as he offers his condolences and exits the building. Locking back the door, he begs Olivia to ignore his editor's words, and she expresses her shock, although a bit calm that her name is not revealed. Yet. Lacking emotions on her face, she spills the tea about her final plan of moving out of the penthouse, especially since the scandal is all blown over. She contacts Minson, and Max can't help but wonder what the problem is, but decides to stay completely out of it. The next scene reveals Olivia in a taxi as she and Max exchange their goodbyes, but before they finally part ways, she reminds him to send her the address of Tommy's funeral, and he waves at her as the car drives off. Meanwhile, we spot Damian and Russell across the road as the latter questions his plans for getting her back, and he says something about her needing alone time to think things through, something that Russell doesn't understand, obviously. He further speaks about his plans of not deciding to use her, coupled with the fact that his face is the least want-to-see faces on her mind. Russell gets exasperated once again about his plans to put the drug development on hold, stating the possibility of her running away. He suggests keeping an eye on her, but Damian warns him to let her be until she gets better from the injury. The next morning reveals Silas waking up from an endless sleep, covered in bandages as he gasps for air. He seems to have no memory of the head's meeting, loathing himself for waiting time on long-ass sleep. However, he seems to recall Damian's strength, and he bangs on the door with the intention of finding more humans to turn betas. The security personnel inform him of Turner leading the mass at the very moment, and he delights in the news as it will give him a head start. But then, they try to stop him, and he mocks their wolf kind, warning them not to stand in his way. The man in the suit becomes the voice of reason, highlighting all the bruises on his body which might end him in more serious trouble. He continues his advice, but soon after, he finds himself on the floor while the other staggers behind. He lets them know that he won't be taking any sort of insults from them, despite the shape he is in. The other man decides to transform into a wolf, which only makes Silas laugh even harder at his stupidity. He promises it a good beat while transforming into a larger wolf, and as the battle begins, Silas beats him up, clawing and biting at it before flinging him with reckless abandon. He warns the wolf, but the weaker wolf doesn't take the hint as he recharges, its scary red eyes glowing. The memorial service for Tommy comes to a wrap, and Max thanks her for making an appearance, although apologizes for the empty casket. She sympathizes with him and assures him of pleased Tommy in heaven, after seeing all his effort. However, he pries further regarding how long she plans on staying with Minson, and she replies to him, talking about getting her things from the penthouse and every other thing done as soon as possible, since gives her hell. Always talking about making up with Damian. He also asks about the last time they had spoken, and she tells him, filling him in on his plan to send Luna a doctor, which she seemingly concurs with, to avoid running into him. Max Reynolds? Turner calls out, and the redhead pays his respect as they exchange pleasantries, introducing Olivia when he inquires about her identity. Olivia also shows her respect, complimenting the service he had conducted, and that is when it strikes him, recognizing her face from the diner and hoping she doesn't recognize him. Adjusting his glasses for a better disguise, he questions their plans to visit the cemetery, and after a few whispers and eye contact, Olivia agrees to follow him, and he chooses to be her guide. Catching subtle whiffs of Damian's scent, he remembers the bullet with Damian's blood, refusing to believe that it's a coincidence, as he takes it as a sign from God to look into her. The hall is empty once again, and a certain white wolf hovers about, getting annoyed at the empty space since it imagines feasting on humans for breakfast. However, he decides to heal while pretending as a priest, rather than going back to meet the black wolves. Internally, he thanks Turner for forcing him to attend Mass, as it turns out to be of help. But then, out of nowhere, Olivia steps into the church, greets the father, and walks directly to where she must have dropped her veil. Seconds later, she finds it, but Silas apologizes for interrupting her, and she flinches, commenting on the manner he scared her. She inquires what he wants, but he only ponders on what business she has with the church. He uses his hand to block his face stylishly, hoping she won't recognize him, but she catches sight of his injury and reaches out to help. He simply waves her off, and this brings memories of the way Damian had done the same, blaming herself for acting like a fool. Deciding not to overstep, she offers her apology for being nosy as she announces her intentions to get going. Not ready to be separated from her, he offers his hand, making a shitty excuse about an imaginary mass starting soon. Also mentioning the absence of the first aid kit. He offers her a piece of clothing to use instead, taking his gracious time to bask in her scent. Even though he doesn't perceive Julia anymore, he holds the belief that it is definitely hers. Moving forward, he wonders why when she doesn't look like Julia, coming close to her until their boots collide. He stares at her intensely, and she is forced to drop his hands while she wonders about the reason he stares at her in that manner. Looking in the direction of a certain sound, she looks around, her eyes coming in contact with the raging wolf. "A wolf," she screams. Silas rolls his eyes at the party pooper that follows him this far. Nevertheless, he refuses to act rashly to avoid putting her in harm's way, deciding to battle with his human form. Silas screams at her to run, but she simply stands there speaking her English vocabulary. What's more, she tries to dissuade him from fighting the beast, but even he gets tired of her blabbering. He demands that she go fetch the priest if she's worried indeed, but she keeps blabbering, questioning how he would be of help, and he gets fed up, instructing her to run while he distracts. Trembling, she is torn between calling the police or people around when she hears her name. Turner shows her the way out, instructing her to run for her dear life, but she informs him of the need to call the police, and he announces to have already done so. She doesn't give up, trying to find out Silas's fate, but Turner informs her not to worry as he will go help out. Our leading female doesn't take the hint as she opts to help, which the father appreciates, but encourages her to leave as she would only be a hindrance. Blessing her, he retires back to the church, and she makes a decision to help out, dashing into the cemetery with the intention of finding Max. Suddenly, she trips over a stone, and before she can kiss the hard floor, Damian catches her by the waist, making the dormant butterflies in our belly flutter. She's obviously still a bit furious as she puts a distance between her and Damian. She accuses him of following her, but in his defense, he states that Minson had reached out to him, saying that she was waiting for him in the chapel. Annoyed at her friend's tactics, she states her reason for coming to the church, which he now realizes, though voicing the need to see her. Confused, Olivia wonders why he now acts that way, when he had treated her as a nuisance from their last encounters. He questions the reason for being in such a hurry that might have resulted in her hurting herself. She makes mention of the wolf back in the chapel, and he grabs her immediately, probably checking for injuries. He questions the possibility, and she confirms it, and out of nowhere, Max juggles toward them, questioning what Damian is doing in the cemetery. As expected, he ignores his entirety, and Olivia relays the wolf saga to him. When he goes to check it out, Damian stops him, explaining the risk involved as he asks him to go home, although after offering to send his team in. Just when you think you've seen enough drama for the day, a man in disguise takes pictures of the trio, blowing up his cover when his phone hits the ground. The information thirst reporter picks up his and races for the hills, however. Max recognizes him as the editor-chief and chases after him, screaming at Olivia to send someone to the chapel while she stands there, completely dumbfounded. The next scene unfolds with a furious Turner, as he ponders the reason Silas had messed with the fiery betas while in his wounded state, knowing fully well how hard it is to control beta without trust. Screaming the name Silas, he questions what he was thinking, beating a beta in his state, but he explains the fact that his body was already healed even though he never backs down from a fight. Surprised, Turner questions what he has done, but he simply says nothing, and only mentions running into the woman who scents like Julia. When the priest admits that it's far from sensible, but pieces 1 and 2 together. Recalling the scandalous articles about Olivia Moore, a woman that has the two brothers obsessed unknowingly to her. Getting out of his head, he instructs Silas to leave the chapel along with the beta, as Olivia went to get help, but he counters, questioning the reason for running when he can turn them into betas and have Olivia all to himself. Turner warns him against making any move, suggesting that she could be the key to stabilizing the betas. Silas gets irritated, mentioning the fact that she's in Damian's care, and Turner reminds him of saving her life, which could be a key pass to meeting her again, if he doesn't lose her trust. Back in the car, Olivia worries still about the big black wolf she had encountered in the chapel, but calms her down by informing her of his security on their way there. He regrets letting Olivia out of his sight, wishing to have listened to Russell about having her tailed. However, he notices her trembling getting worse and does the gentleman thing of tucking her inside his suit jacket. He whispers to her about being calm when she's warm and asks her to return to the penthouse. She is speechless for some time, but highlights the fact that reporters have backed off. She repeats the speech about protecting her from danger at all costs, and doing all that if she's situated in the penthouse. Sucking in a deep breath, she reminds him that she's a grown-ass woman, not some little girl always seeking help. She accuses him of knowing the true reason she needs to leave, and he remembers how selfish he is to always receive and never to give. He understands her perfectly well and offers to give her a ride to Minson's house instead, and that she agrees to. "Give it back," the editor-in-chief screams, questioning why he takes his stuff, but Max is too furious to listen to his flimsy excuses, questioning if he had followed him to the funeral, but he confesses to coming for a friend's funeral also. He gets annoyed when Max pries further, refusing to give him a reply, but the redhead couldn't care less, flinging the phone into the air with reckless abandon and giving it a good smash when it lands on the floor. Quite excited to have achieved something, he urges him to fire him, but the douchebag informs him of the already uploaded article, as if the day can get any words. In the next scene, we see our female lead together with Damian as they wait for the door to be opened. Thanking him, she lets him know that she is safe, but he insists on waiting till she goes inside, and Minson opens the door almost immediately with a doll expression on her face. She makes a comment about their situationship, and Olivia confesses to having run into him in the chapel, but she doesn't register, instantly informing them of the full-blown emergency. She mentions everything the article contains, the part about Luna's strange disease catching her attention as she requests to see it. Handing her the phone, Minson reassures her the article is a level-graded bullshit, questioning who the culprit might be. Olivia fills her in on Max and his chief editor as she reads the harsh comments accompanying the articles, and emotions get the best of her, even as she feels the need to pass out. Damian takes the phone from her, urging her to stop reading, but she fights to get it back, embarrassed about the world talking about her. Notwithstanding, he hugs and consoles her, whispering reassuring words into her ear, and promises to do all it takes to wipe her name from the newspapers. Minson's smile screams the word mischievous as she drags her friend, putting a distance between the two. She whispers something mischievous into her ear, and Olivia refuses her advice because it involves using Damian. But guess what? He begs her to use him as she pleases, so long it keeps her safe, and mischievous Minson claps her hand while announcing that the problem is solved. Moving on, she suggests that they get engaged, and that way, the rumors will die down. Though she blames him since he has only been with celebrities, which makes her an easy target for internet trollers. Minson continues her analysis of them being engaged to be married, which will turn the haters into her lovers, thereby toning down the criticism. Damian, impressed by her analysis, lets her know that Terra PR could use some of her brains, immediately asking Olivia if she is cool with it. However, she looks hesitant, probably scared of making a decision that big, but he announces his sole intention to protect her, whether they are engaged or married. Sensing how anxious she is, she invites her inside to talk things through, also partly for privacy's sake. Minson checks in on her friend, asking if she's doing all right, and Olivia reassures her that she's calmed down now, still trying to process the whirlwind of events that have unfolded. Minson is curious about why Olivia turned down Damian's offer, and Olivia explains that it's all her fault. The media frenzy, the scandal, everything. She feels weird asking Damian to pose as her fiancé after all that's happened, and she's still grappling with the consequences of her actions. Minson gently suggests that maybe Olivia's hesitation has more to do with her late husband than she's letting on, and Olivia's expression changes, a mix of sadness and nostalgia washing over her. Minson apologizes for overstepping, saying she's just worried about Olivia and wants to see her happy. Minson leans in, pointing out that Damian is a powerful man who can afford to get engaged 100 times without batting an eye, but for Olivia, it's a whole different story. He's got the world at his feet, and she's just trying to navigate the chaos that's become her life. Now that Olivia's name and face are out in the open, she'll be labeled as the woman who seduced Damian for the rest of her life. And with the way things are going, Luna won't be left untouched or unaffected either. Just then, Damian walks in, and they're both surprised to see him, the tension in the air palpable. Olivia apologizes for keeping him waiting, and Minsoon excuses herself, leaving them alone in an awkward silence. Damian apologizes for being rash and rushing into a decision, saying he didn't want Olivia to get hurt. He's had time to reflect, and he realizes that his offer might have been hurtful, and he's willing to take responsibility for his actions. Olivia tells him not to be too hard on himself, taking the blame instead, and Damian looks at her with a mix of surprise and gratitude. As they talk, Olivia can't help but notice how different Damian is now. Cautious, sweet, and gentle, a far cry from the cold, distant person she met before. She admits that the idea of engagement left her dumbfounded at first, something she thought was way behind her. Honestly, she just didn't want to reopen old wounds, and the thought of committing to someone new is daunting. Damian stops Olivia in her tracks, his eyes locked on hers as he assures her she won't get hurt. He takes a deep breath, drops down on one knee, and holds her arm, his voice filled with conviction as he promises to be there for her, to protect her from the chaos that's been unleashed. It's a ridiculously romantic gesture, and Olivia's left speechless, but a smile escapes her lips anyway. She's still trying to wrap her head around Damian's mysterious ways, but in this moment, she feels a spark of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she can trust him. With a nod, she agrees to the whole engagement setup, and Damian's face lights up with a radiant smile. He's grateful for her bold decision, acknowledging that it wasn't an easy choice to make. Olivia waves off his thanks, her eyes locked on his, and she's the one who's truly grateful. Looking at him, still on his knees, with that goofy grin plastered on his face, she feels a flutter in her chest. Fast forward to the public announcement, and Damian's addressing the media, his voice firm and authoritative as he sets the record straight. He and Olivia Moore are engaged, and he's asking the public to back off, to stop making accusations against her. Rumors about his fiancée will be dealt with legally, and he's not messing around. They've certainly made a splash, and the news is spreading like wildfire. Meanwhile, Max is sitting in his office, trying to make sense of the announcement, wondering what kind of game Damian's playing. Is this a smokescreen to protect Olivia, or is there something more to it? Just then, the editor-in-chief walks in, looking smug and self-satisfied, and proceeds to trash-talk Olivia, which gets Max's redhead temper flaring. He grabs his boss, leaving the editor-in-chief baffled by the outburst. Max reminds him that he'd told him to fire the guy, but somehow he'd ignored him. With a flourish, Max hands over a piece of paper containing some very interesting info he found on his boss's computer. A stalking list, proof that he's been paid by influential folks to stalk and fabricate scandals. The editor-in-chief's smug expression falters, and Max is ready to take him down. The editor stands his ground, trying to justify his actions by claiming he's not the first to do this in the industry, and that nobody's clean. But Max is having none of it, his anger still simmering just below the surface. He lets the editor go, but not before warning him that he'll be taking this to Terra, and that he's already handed over the original copy of the evidence. The editor-in-chief's face goes white as fear grips him, and he realizes he's in big trouble. Meanwhile, someone flips over the newspaper, reading the news of Damian and his newly engaged fiancée, and can't help but comment on what a special young man Damian is. His dad looks on, beaming with pride, and it's clear that he's a proud papa. Damian's dad looks remarkably young and attractive, and it's easy to see where Damian gets his good looks from. Damian sits in his office, scanning the articles about his engagement, and it's clear that the public's perception of him has shifted overnight. The articles are more positive, and the malicious comments have died down significantly. Just then, someone steps into his office, and Damian asks about the interview scheduled for the next day, which he doesn't recall arranging. It turns out it's an interview with the press to show off his engagement, and Damian's not exactly thrilled about it. Blondie lets out a deep sigh, still trying to wrap his head around the whole drama with Olivia. He can't fathom why Damian brought her into the picture, especially since it's causing a stir among the family heads. Apparently, many of them thought Damian would marry one of their daughters, and they see his engagement to Olivia as a betrayal. Damian shrugs it off, saying he never intended to marry someone he doesn't know. Blondie points out that a relationship with the Browns would be really advantageous, but Damian's not interested. When asked what he's decided to do with Olivia, Damian drops a bombshell. He's going to imprint on her. Blondie's shock is palpable, and it's clear that this is a big deal. When werewolves reach a certain age, they find a lifelong partner to imprint on, and it's a serious commitment, which is essentially a pledge of love and an everlasting bond. It's not just some human wolf thing, it's a deep commitment. Through imprinting, werewolves can always find their partner, no matter the distance, and they'll sense if they're in danger. Damian's come to this conclusion because he's determined to protect Olivia in his own way. Blondie's having none of it, though, and thinks it's a terrible decision. He points out that humans have a ridiculously short lifespan, barely 100 years, and it's just not fair to Damian. But Damian's all, hey, I'm certain it's not impossible, and brings up the fact that Blondie's relative imprinted on a human in the past. Yeah, that relative became a shell of his former self after his human partner died in a car accident. But Damian's all, I'm willing to take that risk. Blondie's visibly enraged, calling Damian a fool who's just infatuated with Olivia's scent. But Damian stands his ground, his mind made up. He'll do anything to protect her, even if it means risking his own life. Our female lead sits at the table, sipping the glass of red wine Damian poured for her, and comments that she didn't expect all the fuss, thinking they'd just be practicing for their interview. Damian shrugs it off like it's no big deal, and Olivia appreciates his efforts, thanking him for the press conference and announcement that's reduced the negative articles. He asks about her well-being, and she flashes a cheeky smile, assuring him she's much better now. Damian's eyes linger on her neck, and he's on a mission to kiss the nape of her neck to imprint on her, but he's not sure how to go about it. He recalls a past encounter, but Olivia brings him back to the present, asking to go over some interview questions. Damian asks about their origin story, how they met, and Olivia recounts their first meeting in the alley on a rainy day. They share a glance, and Damian's curiosity is piqued, asking why she was in the alley that day. Olivia explains she was on her way back from work, and Damian's interested in her job at the diner. She mentions it wasn't difficult, but she was going through a tough time personally, and that fateful day, she'd asked her boss for an advance for Luna's medication. As fate would have it, their paths crossed, and meeting him was the luckiest thing that ever happened to her. She says this without much enthusiasm, and Damian's tense, trying to play it cool, claiming the wine is a bit strong. Olivia's not buying it, and Damian asks if she meant what she said about him being the luckiest thing that happened. Olivia reaffirms her statement, and Damian's cheeks burn bright red. He stretches out his hands, sliding closer to her, and Olivia's practically frozen, trying to analyze what's happening. Damian's so close to achieving his mission, and the tension between them is palpable. Just as things are getting intense, Blondie strolls in, completely carefree, and stops Damian and Olivia in their tracks. He's got news. The boss wants to see them, and if they don't show up, he'll come to them personally. Damian's offended, not one to be threatened, but Blondie just shrugs and takes off, leaving them with the message. Olivia's curious about who could threaten Damian, and he fills her in. It's his dad, who he and Russell refer to as the boss. She asks about their relationship, and Damian's expression says it all. It's complicated. He reflects on how his dad retired early and passed on the role of family head to him, but still holds the title and the wolves' support. Damian knows his dad's return to New York will disrupt the balance of power, and he's worried he'll find out about Olivia's incredible power and want to use her for research. His dad can be ruthless, and Damian's not sure what to do. He's seen his dad's tactics before, and he knows he'll stop at nothing to get what he wants. Olivia suggests meeting with his dad, but Damian's hesitant, wondering if his dad knows they're faking their engagement. He's not sure how his dad will react, but he knows it won't be good. Damian decides they should meet with his dad as if they're real fiancés and fill him in on the situation later. Olivia's on board, but just as Damian tries to imprint on her again, Luna bursts in, screaming "Mommy!" and foiling his plans for the second time. Luna walks up to her mom, asking if they're going somewhere special, and Olivia's completely confused. Apparently, Russell told Luna they'd be going somewhere, and he's interrupted Damian's plans once again. As they stare at the building in sight, Luna's eyes widen in amazement and she squeals with delight. "It's like a princess castle!" she exclaims, bouncing up and down. Damian, on the other hand, looks less than thrilled. He had no intention of returning to this place until he'd perfected the drug, but here they are. He turns to Olivia and warns her not to leave his side, advising her to be careful around his father. Olivia raises an eyebrow, wondering what he's talking about, but before she can ask any questions, the gate creaks open and two men walk up to them. James, Damian's father, greets his son with a smile, but Damian's response is lukewarm. James turns his attention to Olivia, and she looks him straight in the face, wondering why Damian warned her about him. James smiles charmingly and tells her to address him as James, proceeding to kiss her knuckles and welcome her to the Brown Manor. Damian watches the exchange with a disgruntled look on his face, clearly not trusting his father. As they enter the manor, James shows them to their room, explaining that it's not always used, but he had it put in order for their visit. Luna's having the time of her life, taking in the sights and sounds of the grand manor. Olivia comments on how pretty everything is, but Damian's expression remains the same. He just looks pissed. James thanks Olivia for her appreciation, saying it's his pleasure to accommodate them. After all, they're his future daughter-in-law and granddaughter. Luna thanks him too and gets a pat on the head from James. But just as things are going smoothly, Damian requests that they get a different room, and his dad asks why. Damian's response is immediate and intense. He screams that his dad knows exactly why he wants a different room. The room belonged to Julia, and the tension in the air becomes palpable. It's clear that there's a lot of history and emotion tied up in this room, and Damian's reaction is just the tip of the iceberg. James asks what's wrong with the room, but Damian's not having it, pleading to stay somewhere else. Our protagonist is perfectly fine with the room, though, and Luna's already in love with it. Olivia gently pushes Damian aside, suggesting he go catch up with his dad and calm down. But Damian's being super clingy, refusing to leave her side. Our girl's not having it, though, and eventually Damian agrees to leave. As soon as he's out the door, Olivia's face turns bright red, and she can't help but wonder how Damian could so comfortably say something so awkward in front of his father. Just then, a friendly-looking lady breezes in, holding a kettle in hand, and greets Olivia with a warm smile. She introduces herself as Annie, explaining that she's been assigned to help Olivia and Luna during their stay. Our female lead is grateful for the help, and it's clear that Annie's going to be a regular face around here. Annie pours a glass of tea, and Olivia compliments the tea, noticing it's steeped with flowers from the gardens at Brown Manor. Annie asks if Olivia has any allergies, wanting to inform the chef, but Olivia assures her she's all good. Annie's not taking no for an answer, though. Apparently, Brown made it clear they're to be treated like royalty. Olivia laughs and mentions that Luna loves steak, and Annie grins, excited to share the news with the chef. For a moment, Olivia sees James as a kind and generous man, not the threat Damian made him out to be. But then she hears a clattering noise behind her and turns around to see Luna playing with a chair, almost falling over. Olivia springs up in a flash, screaming at Luna to be careful. In the chaos, Annie reacts quickly, spilling some tea on Olivia's skirt. On purpose, it seems. Why, though? She apologizes right away, but Olivia's not sure what to make of it. Luna dashes towards her mom, and Olivia takes the blame, being her usual humble self. Luckily, the tea wasn't hot, so she's not hurt. Annie offers to get her some spare women's clothes, and Olivia agrees, still feeling a bit bewildered. As Annie hands her a white dress, Olivia asks if it's really all right, and Annie assures her it's all good. But when Annie offers to style Olivia's hair to match the dress perfectly, Olivia starts to feel a sense of unease. Damian's still fuming about the room James chose for Olivia, and he's not afraid to show it. The boss, however, is calm and collected, saying his boy's still as impatient as ever. Damian's not having it, though. He's all business, demanding to know why James left Julia's room untouched and why he chose that particular room for Olivia's use. James responds calmly, saying a lot of work went into getting the room in tip-top condition, and Damian's just holding on to past memories. Damian senses a bit of truth in his dad's words, but he's not having it. Just then, his vision gets blurry and he feels dizzy and disoriented. James observes that his son's still obsessed with Julia, and that's why he's attracted to Olivia, another human. Damian waves it off, refusing to accept his father's theories. He insists he likes Olivia because she's a good person, and it has nothing to do with Julia. The boss isn't buying it, though, and he says if Olivia's as good as Damian claims, she'll accept him for who he really is. Damian's left speechless, and he springs up from his seat, leaving to meet up with his fiancée. As he leaves, he passes by the manor's butler, who bows in respect to the young master. The butler informs James that his instructions have been carried out. Annie's given the clothes to Olivia. It's clear that James is behind some kind of plot, but what could it mean? It's just a dress, after all. James spills the rest of his tea on the nearby plant, and it's clear he's on a mission to find out if Olivia's truly a good person, as Damian claims. The boss believes strongly that Olivia's just someone his son is attracted to. And there's something he's worried about, something that concerns Julia. It's clear that James has an ulterior motive, and it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. If Olivia's a human with the same powers as Julia, James will stop at nothing to keep her away from Damian. That rare power, which physically heals wounds but draws you in mentally with a scent that makes you long for them, is a trap set by powerful people to lure werewolves. James knows it can't be true love, and he's determined to protect his son. Meanwhile, Damian's walking down the hallway when he suddenly stops in his tracks, his head banging and legs shaking. He doesn't feel too good, and he knows he needs to pull himself together. If Olivia uses her powers on him, his dad will find out and confirm his suspicions. Damian takes a deep breath, trying to be natural, but shock is written all over his face. He looks ahead, and his eyes widen in disbelief. What is she doing here? He asks, his voice trembling. But as he looks closer, he realizes it's not Julia. It's Olivia, looking lost and confused. Damian apologizes, explaining that he didn't recognize her in the new outfit. James walks up, complimenting Olivia on the dress, and Damian's eyes narrow. He's put the pieces together. His dad made Olivia wear Julia's dress, and that's what's got him so angry. "Why did you make her wear this?" Damian demands, his voice rising. Olivia tries to calm him down, looking confused, and asks what the problem is. Damian's response is immediate. "The dress doesn't suit you. Take it off." Olivia's stunned, but she agrees, saying she felt the same way when she put it on. The tension in the air is palpable, and it's clear that James's plan is already in motion. But what's his endgame, and how will Damian and Olivia react to the challenges ahead? James swoops in, completely ignoring Damian's question and the awkward conversation that just went down. He offers to show Olivia around the house, and she agrees, seeming to enjoy the prospect of exploring the grand estate. As she walks off with James, Damian's left standing there, feeling like he's been punched in the gut. Everything's happening so fast. First, he's hit with that dizzying pain, and then he's having visions of Julia. He staggers forward, holding his head, trying to process what's going on. It's like his world's been turned upside down, and he's struggling to keep up. He watches as Olivia disappears around the corner with his dad, feeling a pang of unease. What's James's game plan here? And why's Olivia so trusting of him? Damian's mind's racing with questions, but he's not getting any answers, at least not yet. Olivia and James are hanging out in the library, surrounded by a fascinating collection of books. James mentions that his family's been collecting these books for generations, and he offers to let Olivia borrow any book she'd like. As she scans the shelves for something that catches her eye, her mind starts to wander. She can't help but think about Damian's behavior earlier. He was being so harsh and strange. It's like when they were at the lab, and he told her she didn't belong there. She pulls a book from the shelf, and James notices, asking if she's thinking about his son. Olivia quickly denies it, saying she's just found a book she'd like to borrow. But James is too clever, and he asks again, this time wondering if she's upset with Damian for the way he acted earlier. Luna chimes in, saying she can see a wolf in the book's title, and James collects the book, teasing Olivia about her choice. Later, James asks Olivia if she's certain Damian has her best interests at heart. Olivia insists that he does, but James scoffs in disbelief, his expression cold and skeptical. The conversation leaves Olivia feeling uneasy, and she tries to convince herself that she's just being paranoid. But the encounter leaves a bad taste in her mouth. At dinner, James asks Olivia if she enjoyed the tour of the house, and she thanks him for showing her around. He asks Luna what she liked most, and the little girl is too busy devouring her steak to care about anything else. James turns his attention to Damian, asking where he disappeared to after their encounter in the hallway. Our guy, Damian, is trying to play it cool, saying he was just resting in his room, but his dad's not buying it. James knows how to push his buttons, and he says that ditching his fiancée and holing up in his room isn't exactly the best behavior. Olivia tries to smooth things over, saying she's sure Damian was just tired, and he assures her he's feeling better now. But the truth is, he blacked out in the hallway and somehow ended up on his bed. It's mysterious, and Damian's not sure what's going on. He's trying to keep his cool, sipping his wine with composure, but when he looks up to start a conversation with Olivia, something's off. Suddenly, he's in a state of alarm again, and a familiar voice is questioning him about the drug. Through his glass of wine, he sees Julia sitting across the table from him, and it's like a memory replaying before his eyes. She walks up to him, reminding him of his promise to take the drug and become human like her. Damian's shocked, and Julia's deranged look is freaking him out. He's promised to stay with her forever, and it's like a horror movie scene unfolding before his eyes. Damian's reaction is intense. He shatters his glass of wine, sweats profusely, and looks like he's about to pass out. Olivia's worried, asking if he's all right, but Damian's not responding. He knows that if he collapses, Olivia will use her powers, and that's the last thing he wants. Our guy quickly gets up, asking to be excused, and walks away, slamming the door behind him. Olivia's left speechless, worried about him, and James is asking her how she feels about all this. He's pointing out that Damian has no respect for her, and Olivia's taking her time to respond. She thinks about James's behavior. He's completely unfazed, as if he expected Damian to walk out. He didn't even ask anything when Olivia changed her outfit earlier. Now, it's like he's trying to change her mind about Damian. Olivia's not having it, though. She says Damian's just struggling, and James should be worried about his son, not criticizing him. She gets up, determined to follow Damian and check on him. James asks why she's doing all this, even after what she's seen, and Olivia looks back at him, saying she's worried about her fiancé. She storms out, leaving James looking thoughtful. Damian's walking in the woods, but he has no idea how he ended up here. He ran out of the mansion without thinking, and now he's surrounded by trees. He's been here before, though. He remembers coming here to think about upping the dosage of wolfsbane. He was experimenting with the drug, trying to find a way to control his werewolf instincts. As he walks, he hears a rustling in the bushes behind him. He turns around, and someone steps out of the bushes, saying hi. It's Julia, the girl he met in these very woods. She asked him if he was a wolf, and he was surprised to see a human out here. But Julia wasn't afraid of him. Her father was a hunter, so she was used to being around predators. They became fast friends, and eventually, something more. Looking back, Damian regrets how things turned out. As he stands there, lost in thought, He remembers the night Julia walked up to him in the woods. He'd warned her not to come near the Brown estate that day. It was a blue moon, and the werewolf's instincts were running wild. But Julia didn't listen, and she showed up, sobbing uncontrollably. Damian rushed towards her, asking what was wrong, and she managed to speak through her tears. Her parents wanted to marry her off to some guy she'd never met, and she was devastated. Damian was stunned. He had no idea things were that bad for her. Julia blamed him for her situation, saying that if he'd just hurried up with the drug development, she wouldn't be in this mess. Damian felt a pang of guilt. He knew he'd promised to help her, but he hadn't realized things were so urgent. Now, as he stands in the woods, he can't help but wonder what would have happened if he'd just been faster, if he'd just been able to save her. Damian's trying to reassure Julia, saying he's not empty-handed. The instinct suppressant is almost complete. Julia's face lights up with excitement, and she asks if he won't turn into a wolf anymore. But then Damian's all caution, saying the suppressant isn't stable and needs more fine-tuning. Julia's not having it, though. She says he's being overly cautious and suggests they test it right now. Damian's taken aback, but Julia's not shaken. She says the best time to test it is when his instincts are at their peak, and that's right now under the blue moon. Damian's hesitant, saying he doesn't want Julia to be in danger if things go south. But Julia's emotional switch is flipped, and she's suddenly wailing on the ground, saying she thought she could trust him, but he wouldn't even care if she ended up marrying some delusional man and living a miserable life until she eventually dies. Damian's alarmed, saying he'd never want that for her. But Julia's got a crooked smile on her face, and it's clear she's manipulating him. What's going on here? Julia's supposed to be sweet and loving, but she's being super manipulative. Julia looks him dead in the eye, her expression a mix of desperation and despair. She asks if he wants her to be miserable, and tears start rolling down her cheeks. Damian's in a state of alarm, but eventually he comes to a decision. He pulls Julia up and says he'll take the suppressant. He pulls out a vial from his pocket and tells Julia to run away the moment she feels unsafe. Damian gulps down the vial's contents, drops the glass vessel to the ground, and Julia asks how he feels. The tension is palpable as they wait to see what happens next. Will the suppressant work, or will Damian's werewolf instincts take over? Damian's struggling to breathe, his body's burning up, and he's wondering if it's because of the blue moon. He falls to his knees, and just as he's trying to catch his breath, a rustling noise comes from the bushes behind him. A wolf emerges, snarling and ready to attack. Julia's terrified, and in a flash the wolf leaps towards her. But just in time, another wolf intercepts it mid-air. It's Damian in his true form. The two wolves clash, and Julia's left staring in utter silence, her fear and shock rendering her speechless. She manages to whisper Damian's name, and the victorious but blood-stained Damian turns his attention to her, growling. Julia's scared out of her wits and takes off running, with Damian following close behind, begging her to wait up. He assures her he's in his right mind and not trying to hurt her, but she's too afraid to listen. She keeps running, begging him to stop following her, screaming at him to stay back and calling him a monster. They finally reach a cliff, and Julia's got nowhere to go, but she keeps moving away, practically at the edge. She stumbles and Damian screams, stretching out his arm to catch her, but he fails. It's a memory that scarred him ever since, and even now he looks back and blames himself for Julia's death. Tonight, Damian stands at the same cliff out in the moonlight, reflecting on it all. Tears stream down his eyes as he relives the pain of that night. Just then, someone calls out his name with a loud voice from behind. He turns around, and it's Olivia, running up to him with concern etched on her face. She embraces him, and for a moment, Damian feels a sense of comfort and peace. Right when he needs her, Olivia shows up, and it's like she's been sent to soothe his troubled soul. As they stand there, wrapped in each other's arms, Damian feels a weight lift off his shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, he's found someone who can help him heal and move on from his painful past. Damian's still trying to process how he ended up on the floor with Olivia, but she's already grilling him with questions. She wants to know why he was standing so close to the edge of the cliff, if he's suicidal, and she's bawling her eyes out. Damian's quick to reassure her that he's not suicidal, but Olivia's not buying it. She asks why he was running in the woods like someone was chasing him, and how he ended up at the cliff. Damian tries to downplay it, saying he just had a headache and was trying to walk it off, but Olivia's not convinced. Our girl, Olivia, is determined to get to the bottom of things. She's been noticing that Damian's been acting strangely lately, and she's worried about him. She asks him again why he was standing so close to the edge, and Damian finally opens up. With a sober look on his face, he reveals that the cliff is where Julia fell to her death. Olivia's taken aback, and she asks if he's still not over Julia. But Damian's quick to clarify that it's not what she thinks. He's not still pining for Julia. Instead, he's consumed by guilt and a sense of responsibility for her death. He says Julia was running away from him when it happened, and that's a burden he'll always carry. Olivia's curious, and she asks what he did to scare Julia so much. Damian hesitates, wondering why he's opening up to her like this. He's practically broken down, and he apologizes because he can't tell her the truth. Olivia's trying hard to be understanding, but she really wants to know what's going on. She looks him in the face and says she really wants to know. Damian asks why, and Olivia's memories flash before her eyes. They've shared some rare moments together, and she's just realizing that she genuinely cares about him deeply. The realization hits her hard, and she can't keep it inside. Olivia's pouring her heart out to Damian, telling him he means a lot to her and doesn't have to pretend everything's okay when they're together. She touches his hands with love and affection, and Damian's eyes light up. He's clearly moved by her words. Olivia asks him to open up and share what's really going on inside that head of his. She flashes him a hearty smile, and Damian's eyes widen in response. For a moment, it's like time stands still. Damian's about to dive into deep waters, and our girl is holding her breath. He starts by saying there's something about him she needs to know. He's not your average Joe. Olivia's curiosity is piqued, and she asks what he means by not ordinary. Damian hesitates, saying it's definitely strange, but he can't be more specific just yet. What he can say, though, is that Olivia's the reason he's still breathing. He locks hands with hers, and his eyes burn with intensity. Every breath he takes is hers, he says, and our girl's heart skips a beat. These are some deeply romantic words, and Olivia's not sure if she's ready for this level of emotional intimacy. But at the same time, she can't help but feel drawn to Damian's vulnerability and sincerity. Damian's carrying Olivia back to the manor, and she's asking him to put her down, but he's not having it. He's wondering what kind of human she is. Running through the dark woods out of concern for him, he notices the bruises on her legs and decides there's no way he's letting her walk back on those legs. As he walks onward, Olivia's reflecting on their conversation at the cliff. He said he's not normal. But what did he actually mean? She can understand him being the CEO of Terra being a big deal, but something's definitely off. She doesn't think that's what he meant. Personally, she's observed some unusual things about him. His looks, for starters, are far from ordinary. She's also noticed that he's incredibly intelligent and resourceful, and there's something about him that just draws her in. She can't quite put her finger on it, but she feels a deep connection to him. Damian asks her to sit down for a moment, jolting her back to reality. He says he'd like to clean her wounds, and she's down for that. Olivia sits on a rock near a pool of water, takes off her shoes, and Damian removes his coat. He's really gentle with her, cleaning her wounds with care and precision. As he works, he starts up a conversation about his dad using her to test him. His father tried to see if Damian's really in love with Olivia or just substituting her for Julia. Damian says his father thinks he hasn't gotten over Julia, which is why he had Olivia stay in Julia's room and even gave her Julia's dress to wear. Damian assures Olivia that he doesn't see her as a substitute, and she believes him. She says it explains why he's been arguing with James so much, and she had her suspicions about his father too. Olivia understands it must have been frustrating for Damian not being able to tell her about it all along. And she pats him on the head gently. Damian looks at her with mischief in his eyes, then proceeds to peck her knee. Olivia shivers and trembles all over, clearly affected by his touch. Olivia's wondering what Damian's doing, and he claims he's just stopping the bleeding. but she's not buying it. He's kissing her, after all. Damian's got a weird way of showing affection, but Olivia's not complaining. He says he wants to erase every scar from her body, and our girl's intrigued. Damian's face is inches from hers, and he's saying some pretty intense stuff, like how pain masks other pain. Olivia's taken aback, thinking that's some pretty deep stuff coming from the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. But before she can respond, Damian shuts her up with a kiss. In all honesty, Olivia knows Damian's strange, but she's into it. He's brushing her hair, and it's clear he's trying to imprint on her, to keep her safe. He's dead serious about it, too. He'll do it, even if it leads to his own death. But when Olivia cries out in pain, Damian pauses. There's a scar on her neck. He asks what's wrong, and our girl explains she must have gotten cut on a branch on her way up. Damian's apologetic, blaming himself for her pain. He's been saying he'd protect her, but all he's done is hurt her time and again. Damian's torn. He doesn't want to hurt Olivia, but he also can't bear the thought of losing her. Imprinting on her might cause her pain, but not imprinting might put her in danger. He's battling with decision-making, but ultimately he decides to hug her instead. He's made up his mind. He'll reveal what he is to Olivia and let her decide whether she wants to be with him or not. It's a risk, but he's willing to take it. Damian's had enough of hiding his true self, and he's ready to face whatever consequences come his way. He's tired of living a lie, tired of pretending to be something he's not. He wants to be free, free to be himself, free to love Olivia without fear of rejection or judgment. Back at the manor, the butler's got an update on Miss Olivia and Damian, and it's a doozy. It's been confirmed that Olivia's got the same ability as Julia, and James is freaking out, thinking she's a threat to Damian's safety. But here's the thing. James actually seems to care about his son's well-being, which is kind of surprising. The butler drops another bombshell. Olivia saved Damian's life, throwing herself in harm's way to protect him. James is startled, glancing at little Luna as he tries to process this new info. The butler's observation is that Olivia's different from Julia. Instead of putting Damian in danger, she saved him. James is left speechless, realizing that maybe Olivia isn't just a Julia substitute after all. He asks the butler if he's certain about what he saw, and the butler confirms it. James is pondering the implications, thinking back to how sincere Olivia's concern for Damian seemed earlier. Just then, the door bursts open, and in walk Damian and Olivia, with Luna in tow. Mother and daughter share a warm hug, and Olivia apologizes for keeping Luna waiting. But Luna's not bothered, saying she got to eat tons of yummy food, so it's all good. James watches the trio, and for a moment they look like a loving family. He can't remember the last time he saw his son smiling and glowing like this. He calls out to Damian, asking for a word, and suggests Olivia and Luna go relax. The butler offers to show them to their room, and the two of them head out. As Olivia leaves, she glances back at Damian and his father, wondering what James wants to talk to him about. Is he going to finally accept her as Damian's partner, or is there something more sinister brewing? Only time will tell. James is having a heart-to-heart with his son, and it's getting real. He says Damian was a mess after Julia's passing, but he's not the same anymore. Damian credits Olivia for the change, saying she's been the turning point in his life. James is curious, asking what's so special about her. Damian gushes about how she saved him from going over the edge of the cliff and encouraged him to be honest with himself. James raises an eyebrow, thinking it's cheesy for a human to talk about honesty when they lie so often. Damian calls out his dad, saying he appreciates the little talk, but it's more than his father has ever done for him. James is speechless, and Damian drops another bombshell. He feels like everyone's out to exploit him, including his own dad. James defends himself, saying he did it all for Damian's good, but Damian's not buying it, at least not entirely. James knows Olivia's got the same powers as Julia, and that's a major concern. He'd rather test some human than watch his son die. Despite his tough exterior, it's clear James cares deeply for his son. Damian acknowledges that he hit rock bottom because he pushed too hard testing the drug, but James thinks it's because Julia swayed him. They need to make sure that never happens again. Damian's made up his mind to stay away from Olivia on the day of the blue moon, but he knows there's a high chance she'll leave him anyway when she finds out the truth. James is shocked, worrying that Olivia will leak the secret to the press, but Damian assures him she'd never do that. If she decides to stay, then he can move forward with plans to develop a new drug, as James knows a potent poison can become a strong medicine. James is impressed with Damian's cleverness, realizing his son had a plan all along. Damian warns his dad that if he gets rid of Olivia, he'll lose the chance to actualize his plans. James is still skeptical, thinking there's a probability Damian's lying to protect Olivia. But Damian's not having it, saying he's not naive to lie about something he's certain his dad will find out eventually. Damian demands that his father apologize to Olivia, and James is taken aback by his son's audacity. Damian doesn't care what his father thinks, and he storms out, slamming the door behind him. The boss sits back, thinking about his next move. He's not sure what to make of Damian's newfound confidence and determination. Meanwhile, it's a new day, and Damian, Olivia, and Luna are ready to leave. Damian looks like he's been up all night. Those dark circles under his eyes are a dead giveaway. He's managed to distract James by focusing on the new drug, but he knows his father's unpredictable, so there's still a chance he'll harm Olivia. As they're leaving, James apologizes for his behavior yesterday, saying he did it out of concern for his son. He pleads for Olivia's forgiveness, and she graciously accepts, saying it's fine, she wasn't hurt or anything. Damian's wondering if he was too worried after all. James walks up to him, tells his son to focus on developing the new drug, and proposes a truce, sealing it with a handshake. Damian's skeptical, but he shakes his father's hand, telling him he won't let him down. He calls out to Olivia, and they get in their car, ready to zoom off. As they drive away, James is still staring out at the distance, lost in thought as he reflects on his son's words. He's thinking about how sometimes poison can become strong medicine in the right hands. And he's got to admit, Damian's got a point. He's still trying to wrap his head around the fact that his son might actually reveal his true identity soon, especially with the blue moon fast approaching. Time will tell. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Terra building, where Damian's meeting up with Olivia. He's surprised she came around, but she says she's here for Luna, who's having another test done today. Damian takes a seat beside her and asks who recommended the test this time around. She mentions it's the doctor she met at the lab the other time she came around. Damian's intrigued, saying he didn't hear about it before now and would have sent his assistant instead. He's worried it might have stirred up some unpleasant memories for Olivia, especially after their encounter in the lab hallway. Damian apologizes for his behavior back then, saying he wasn't himself and had no intention of hurting her feelings. Olivia takes a sip of her tea, saying he looked really distressed that day, and she'll take his word for it that it was a mistake only if he's honest with her and answers one question. Olivia's curious, asking why he got hurt that day, and if it's all right, he tells her now. Damian explains that he was high on painkillers and got into a fight that day. Olivia's surprised, asking if he's still taking pills like that, and Damian confirms it's because of the disease mentioned in the news article. Olivia's eyes widen in understanding, and she asks if this is what he meant when he said he wasn't an ordinary person. Damian's taken aback, staring into nothingness for a moment before responding. Our girl quickly realizes her statement sounds like she's cornering him, and that's not her intention, so she touches him gently and says it's okay. He's just the way he is, and she accepts him for who he is. He can be himself when he's with her. Our girl's so caring, and Damian appreciates her for being so sweet. But deep down, he's worried she'll not hold him like this once she learns the truth. This thought troubles him deeply. He'd planned to confess after solving the mystery of the wolf case from the church the other day, but he's not made any progress with the investigation. And deep down, our male lead is a little relieved. It's weird because it's all mysterious. But when he holds on to Olivia, all the cares in the world somewhat fade. They've switched to a different location, and now they're in Damian's office, where he informs Olivia they're throwing a charity party to mark Terra's founding anniversary in a few weeks. It's a pretty big occasion for their family and their company. It's practically the highlight of the year. known to attract the attention of everyone from the business world to politics and even entertainment. Olivia says it sounds amazing, but she's still curious to know why he'd invited her to his office and what the charity party has to do with her. And that's when he drops the bombshell, offering to have her host the party. She's stunned. It's unexpected. After all, it's such a huge event. Damian assures her he'll be helping out with the preparations. But unfortunately, though, he won't be able to attend. He's got a prior commitment he just can't cancel. He's certain her showing up at the event alone will raise eyebrows and possibly bad press, so he'd rather have her as a host. Our girl accepts the responsibility. And Damian's relieved, but little does he know, this charity party is going to be a game changer for all of them. Damian's being super helpful, offering to lend a hand in any way he can to make sure the event's a massive success. And let's be real, they do make a pretty awesome team. Olivia's still on cloud 9. She can't believe she's actually going to be hosting a party, and not just any party, a grand, glamorous, and utterly glorious one. Olivia's dishing out all the deets to Sarah about the upcoming charity party, and she's feeling a tad overwhelmed. It's a big deal, and she's not sure she's got what it takes. After all, her party planning experience is limited to her high school prom. Sarah's listening intently, her eyes wide with excitement. She's always been the party-loving type, and Olivia's grateful to have her as a friend. Sarah's energy is infectious, and Olivia's starting to feel a little better. Maybe this party thing won't be so bad after all. Sarah's bouncing up and down, excitedly talking about dresses and decorations, and Olivia's laughing, feeling a little more at ease. She mentions Dr. Aiden, and Sarah's all curious, asking questions about the pharmaceutical red lab. Olivia's filling her in on all the details, and Sarah's listening attentively. She's always been a good listener, and Olivia appreciates that about her. As they chat, Sarah's aura switches up, and she's all jovial and curious, asking about Olivia's relationship with Damian. Olivia's blushing a little, feeling a little self-conscious, but Sarah's just being her usual nosy self. Olivia's used to it, and she's not bothered. She's happy to share some details, but not too much. She's still getting used to the whole fake engagement thing, and she's not sure how much to reveal. Sarah's mind is blown. She's not expecting that twist, but she's supportive, as always, and Olivia's grateful for that. Sarah's thinking to herself that Damian's probably planning to go wild during the blue moon, downing a bunch of ice peas and losing control. It's no secret to the wolves that he goes off the rails during this time, but she keeps all this to herself, instead choosing to boost Olivia's confidence and assure her she's got her back. She's got a plan to make sure Damian pays up for her help later. Though, the scene shifts to an unfamiliar building, where a phone rings and is picked up by Father Lowell, who's on the receiving end of a call from Olivia. She's asking how he's been, saying she's been worried about him since the church was closed and she didn't get his number. Father Lowell appreciates her kind words, saying God has been watching over him, so he's doing all right. Olivia asks after the priest who was with him that day, and Father Lowell assures her he's doing well. He's holding a book with Olivia and Damian's picture on it, and he mentions he's aware Olivia's been pretty busy lately. She immediately offers him an invitation to the charity party and asks where to send it, since she doesn't know his whereabouts. Father Lowell says she should send it to Max Reynolds, the journalist. He'll get the invitation from him, and he politely requests 2 invites. They end their call, and Father Lowell speaks to his friends, saying it's easy to get things done once trust has been established. His guy asks if all this is necessary, suggesting they could just wipe out all the betas if they wanted to. But Father Lowell says they shouldn't draw too much attention to it. They already know how to handle them. It's been confirmed that Damian's going to be stuck in the kennel all day, and Father Lowell reveals their main objective is the kidnapping. His guy's getting a little anxious, asking how Father Lowell plans on getting that invitation, and if he's really going to bring Max, the human journalist, over. Father Lowell's got a plan, though. He's going to assign Max another task, a very important one, and he's got a sly look on his face, like a villain plotting his next move. The day before the charity party, Max finds himself at the church, standing against a wall, breathing heavily, trying to get his bearings. He looks around, wondering what's going on, and notices other people in the building who seem to sense someone's presence and are preparing to go take a look. The priest had asked Max to bring the invitations, but now he's nowhere to be found. And to make matters more confusing, Max sees Damian Brown's secretary here, which makes him wonder if the church is somehow connected to the Terra cure. But it looks like a normal, humble church, nothing out of the ordinary. As the guys gradually approach him, checking around, Max starts to feel severely bothered, thinking he's going to get caught. He wonders if he can slip out the back door, but before he can make a move, Russell and his guy hear noises from outside. Someone's out there, and they both decide to check it out, dashing off to investigate. Max is saved. Whoever distracted them has simultaneously rescued him. He's decided to forget about the invitations and just get out of there, but as he's making his escape, the invitation slips from his hand and falls to the ground. He gets down on his knees to pick it up, but something catches his attention. He looks at the ground and sees drag marks. Max wonders what it could be. He attempts to push the big wooden figure, and to his amazement, a doorway leading underground opens up. He's stunned. It wasn't just some small, humble church after all. There's a whole other world beneath his feet, and Max can't help but feel a sense of adventure. The blue moon is fast approaching, and Damian's feeling the effects. His headache's getting worse, and he knows he needs to head back to the hotel once dawn breaks. But for now, he's standing there, looking up at the moon, lost in thought. When suddenly, he pauses, noticing Olivia dozing on the office sofa. He wonders if she's been working till this hour. She did say she isn't used to parties. It's no wonder she's feeling overwhelmed. Damian's eyes soften as he looks at her. He can't help but feel a pang of concern. He knows how much pressure she's under, and he wants to help her, but he's not sure how. Our guy kneels in front of her, attempting to touch her, but she wakes up just as his hands are about to make contact. He apologizes for waking her, and she rubs her eye, saying she's all right. Damian asks if she's been losing sleep since he told her about the event, and Olivia confirms she's being overambitious. She just wants to do a good job. She laughs, saying she'll have so much fun at the party, he'll wish he made it. Damian's smiling, saying he's jealous of the lucky ones who'll get to see her tomorrow. He's looking at her with such admiration, and Olivia's cheeks are flushing. She's not used to this kind of attention. Olivia asks if he means the party is going to be fantastic, and he says yes, telling her to go to bed since she's got a busy day ahead. They say their goodbyes as Olivia steps out. Damian's watching her go, thinking she's really putting in her best. He hopes everything goes smoothly. He stares out into the open sky. The moon is shining so bright. He has high hopes for the charity party, but for some reason he's nervous, and we all know why. The blue moon is looming. Max is walking down the passage, trying to figure out where it leads. He's been walking for what feels like forever, and he's starting to get a little anxious. But then he halts in his tracks, sighting a figure ahead. It's Father Lowell, who's asking if Max brought the invitations he requested. The journalist is stunned, wondering how Lowell got here. Father Lowell's all smiles, saying Max made it to the right place after all, but Max is skeptical. He's got a ton of questions, like, what's Father Lowell and the Terra cure scheming, and who exactly is Lowell anyway? The priest bursts into horrendous laughter, commending the journalist for his wild imagination, saying it's no wonder he's in the business of chasing celebrities. He takes off his glasses, and now he's got a tone of insanity in his eyes, saying the guys outside, Terra cure's people, don't have a clue what he's scheming. After all, he, Father Lowell, built this passage himself. Max is intrigued, asking why he'd do that, but the priest says he won't spill. The journey here wouldn't be worth it if he did. Instead, he's got something for Max. Another figure appears afar off, and Max enters a state of alarm. He can't believe his eyes. It's someone he'd never imagined he'll come across. Especially not here. It's Tommy, and Max is shocked. Father Lowell asks if he's interested in interviewing the surprise guest, and Max is hesitant, wondering what's going on, but he's also curious. He wants to know what Tommy's doing here, and what Father Lowell's got planned. Russell and his guy are on the case, checking out the site underground, trying to track down the source of a super potent smell. The secretary's got his detective hat on, scouring the area. But it's the faint scent that's really bugging him. He's convinced it's Silas, his guys on the same page, saying whoever distracted them earlier must be hiding down here, luring them into a trap. Russell's staring at his phone, confirming there's no signal, and he's wondering why the guy who lured them would take such a risk. His guy suggests they search the whole place. And Russell's all, let's do this. They're not alone. They've got a whole crew of guys with them, the ones who were supposed to be at tomorrow's party, and they're ready to take on whatever's down here. They're turning the place inside out, cell after cell, but nothing's turning up until someone shouts out that they've found something. It's a dead wolf. Russell walks up to the corpse, and there's this beeping noise coming from it. He inspects it, opening its mouth, and that's when he sees it, a whole lot of dynamite. It's a trap. He shouts to his guys to run, but it's too late. The place erupts in a massive explosion. Boom! It's like the whole underground is shaking. It's the big day. The blue moon is shining bright, and Olivia's stepping into the scene, looking absolutely stunning in her beautiful green dress. The murmurs and gasps are deafening. Everyone's talking about Olivia Moore, Damian Brown's gorgeous fiancé, the single mom who's stealing the show. Her outfit is more than amazing, and she's rocking it with confidence. Luna's by her side, and the little girl's saying her mom's a princess, and she should smile more. It's adorable. And Olivia's beaming with pride. She's taking it all in, enjoying the attention, but also feeling a little overwhelmed. It's a lot to take in, but she's handling it like a pro. Someone screams Olivia's name, and it's her bestie Sarah who's complimenting our girl and getting appreciated in return for all her support. Sarah's saying the party's really classy, and she can't believe it's Olivia's first time hosting. Olivia's laughing, saying Sarah's too kind, but Sarah's insisting it's the truth. And she's not like some people, cough Damian, cough, who shall remain nameless. They're walking around, chatting about the party, and Olivia's a little nervous, but Sarah's telling her to chill. Everyone's eager to see her, and that's why they've got such a huge crowd. Olivia's feeling a little more at ease, thanks to Sarah's reassurance. A young lady walks up to Olivia, looking super shy and practically trembling. She's saying she manages Olivia's fan account and shows her cell phone before asking for a photograph. Olivia's new to all this, so she's asking for more info, and the young lady's practically worshipping her, showering her with praise. Sarah's saying it's fine to oblige and take a picture, since the young lady wants it so badly. More people are coming up asking for photographs and autographs. It's chaos, but Olivia's handling it like a pro. She's smiling, laughing, and chatting with the guests. She's a natural, and everyone loves her. Someone randomly shines a light on Olivia, and it catches her off guard. A young man's questioning her about her relationship with Damian Brown, asking why he's not here, and if it's true their relationship has gone sour. Olivia's covering her face, saying it's not true, but Sarah's cutting her short, saying she doesn't have to answer his question. Sarah's got Olivia's back, and she's not letting anyone get under her skin. Sarah's taking charge, grabbing hold of the camera, and calling security to escort the young guy out immediately. She's got a firm grip on his arm, and he's trying to wriggle free, asking how she's so strong, but Sarah's not having it. She's demanding that they wipe the camera clean of any data before he leaves the venue. A security guard approaches her, apologizing for the inconvenience, and Sarah's asking about the security detail for today's party and Russell's whereabouts. The guard's informing her that Russell's out of reach, and the news is grabbing her by surprise. The head of security, along with all the men he took with him, are nowhere to be found. It's like they vanished into thin air. The guard's telling her they've got a situation with a shortage of staff, so they couldn't send out a search party, and now they're practically just stuck waiting and hoping all is well. Sarah's saying the information is coming really late to her, but not to worry. She'll check it out by herself. She's taking matters into her own hands, and she's not going to let anything ruin Olivia's big day. Afar off, Olivia's staring on, wondering if there's a problem with the party. Someone's walking up to her from behind, calling on our girl. It's Gloria Hill from the Single Mother Support Center. They're exchanging greetings, and Olivia's smiling, trying to play it cool, but she's also a little worried, An announcer's picking up the microphone, calling the attention of everyone around, the spotlight's shining on Olivia. And she's being invited to the podium, she's welcomed with a round of applause, and she's taking her place, trying to soak it all in. Back at Damian's place, he's laying in his indoor cell, back against the wall, a bottle of drugs toppled over, and his phone's laying on the floor, vibrating, but he's unresponsive. He's out cold, and it's unclear what's going on. Is he okay, or is something more sinister at play? Damian's phone is vibrating repeatedly, and finally, he opens his eyes, stretching out his hands weakly to pick up his cell. He's got 3 messages from Russell, and they're super short, but they're packed with info. Church, dungeon, trap Silas, that's all. Damian's shocked. His eyes are scanning the messages, trying to make sense of them. And just as he's processing everything, a call comes in. It's Sarah on the line. She's informing him she's not been able to reach Russell, and she's updating him on the situation, with the party security being understaffed because Russell took all the men with him. Sarah's apologizing for bothering him. She knows why he's not at the party, but Damian's not even listening. All he can think of is Olivia. He drops his cell and gets up on his feet. Sarah's calling to him on the phone, but he's not responding. He's trying to put the pieces together in his head, and finally, he comes to a conclusion. It's Silas. He's been after Olivia this whole time, and Damian's spot on. He's practically staggering right now, holding on to the steel cell bars for support. He knows if he just transforms into a wolf, he could protect Olivia, but something's stopping him. If he leaves here as a wolf, it could end really badly. History could repeat itself. He's haunted by the memory of losing Julia. It's a problem. A big, big problem. It's the charity party venue, and Silas and Father Lowell are both lurking around. Lowell asks if Silas has taken care of the guys, and Silas confirms he has, showing him the bodies of the unconscious men laying waste in a room close by. Silas asks if all of this was really necessary. He's certain he could have handled it all on his own, but Father Lowell's not having it. He walks up to Silas, tells him not to get cocky, reminds him that they're going up against Damian Brown, so he shouldn't let his guard down. They can't afford a moment's lapse. Silas asks if Father Lowell's harboring a long-standing grudge against Damian, and Lowell flinches at his words. Silas states his theory about the whole thing, guessing it's a revenge plot for a parent or possibly a sibling, or it's just out of spite for Damian Brown. Father Lowell claims it's instinct that's driving him. Pure wolf instinct to overthrow the weaker alpha. What a way to put it, Silas laughs, viewing Lowell's methods as unconventional for someone who claims it's instinct backing his actions. Lowell scoffs at him, says he's a little disappointed Silas doesn't know a lot. He's not about to teach him everything from scratch. After all, Silas was raised like royalty in the Brown household. Silas is visibly upset with the statement, but Lowell calms him down, pats him on the shoulder, and he cools off. Meanwhile, back at the party, Olivia's speech is about to end. She's talking about her late husband and the difficulties she's faced as a single parent. But luckily for her, she's been privileged to meet people, good people who cared for her well-being and mended her wounded heart. Because of these loving people, a sense of joy has slowly crept back into her heart, and she hopes in her heart that this event brings a light to those going through a dark time. It's a beautiful speech. She takes her time to appreciate each and everyone for their support, thanks the Single Mother Support Center specially, and above all, she thanks Damian. The crowd erupts in applause, and Olivia's smiling, feeling grateful and relieved. But little does she know, danger's lurking around the corner. Just as Olivia's wrapping up her speech, the door creaks open from behind them, and chaos erupts. Someone screams at the top of their lungs, and pandemonium breaks out. It's a wolf, and it's not alone. Panic sets in. Olivia's eyes widen in horror, and Sarah springs into action, alert and ready to defend her friend. The hall descends into chaos, people running wildly in all directions, screaming and crying. Olivia's frantically searching for Luna, calling out her name, but she can't seem to find her. Her friend's got Luna, though, and she's calling out to Olivia, reassuring her that she's got the little one safe. Olivia's friend takes Luna, who's wailing and calling out for her mom. Sarah watches as they make their way out, and then she turns her attention back to the chaos unfolding around her. She's noticed something weird, though. These wolves smell just like them. What kind of monster would unleash this kind of terror in the heart of New York City? And just as she's wondering, the culprit steps forward. It's a familiar face, one that makes Sarah's eyes widen in shock. It's Silas, and he's making a bold statement, one that's going to have major consequences, especially in the heart of New York City, where the unthinkable has just happened. Sarah and Silas are having a standoff. She's asking him if he's gone insane, unleashing this chaos in front of all these humans. But Silas just smiles, orders his betas to take her out. Sarah's demanding some answers, and it's dawning on her. She can't believe it. Is it possible? Could it really be? Is Silas's target really Olivia, the beta's attack? But Sarah's not going down without a fight. Even in her human form, she strikes one wolf with the palm of her hand, sending it flying. But there are more where that came from, and it's definitely going to be a hassle. Her claws grow out as she prepares to defend herself. Meanwhile, Silas is walking up to Olivia. She recognizes him and calls him father. But Silas scoffs at her, says he's not a priest. Our girl's figuring it's a problem. He's laughing, and she starts to draw away slowly, asking him to stay back as she staggers on. But Silas pulls her closer with brute force, hands her a black piece of cloth she gave him the last time. But Olivia's not having it. She strikes it off his hands, refuses to collect it. A loud crashing sound draws her attention towards Sarah's position. She's on the ground, being dragged by a wolf. Olivia's not having this whole humiliation. She knows it's the blue moon, but having this mutt drag her friend around is pissing her off really bad. She kicks the wolf hard across the face and wonders what's the issue with these wolves. They look like regular betas, but something's off. The aura they're giving off is nothing short of bloodlust and a deep fearlessness. A wolf leaps towards her with ferocity. Sarah's ready to defend herself, but she's not sure what she's up against. These wolves are different, and she's going to have to use all her skills to take them down. The wolf leaps towards Sarah, but it's caught in midair by a bigger wolf. It's Damian, and he's not messing around. One strike, and that beta's down for the count. Silas is shocked. He wasn't expecting Damian to show up, especially not after being locked up. But Damian's just laughing, saying he wants Olivia even more now. She's screaming at him to let her go, trying to loosen his grip, but he's not having it. The big dark wolf steps closer to them. Silas is saying he's amazed it's coming for him already, but he's not going down without a fight. He's got his betas to back him up, and they attack Damian, but he's taking them down one by one. Olivia's watching in awe. She can't make sense of the whole scenario, but she's not going to let this opportunity slip away. She decides to make a break for it. Silas is hot on her heels, determined not to let her escape. He almost grabs her again, but she stumbles on her heels and falls backwards. In the blink of an eye, there's swift movement around her, and she falls onto the side of the wolf. He prevents her from falling all the way. She's stunned, questioning what just happened. Did this wolf really just save her? It stares her in the face, and she's frozen in shock. Meanwhile, Damian's battling with his conscience. Julia's clouding his mind, blaming him for her death, calling him a monster. He's telling himself the truth. Julia's gone. But he can't shake off the feeling that he's a monster. Someone screams his name, and he looks around. His eyes are teary, and he sees Olivia. He recalls her telling him how important he is to her. And it's been this way. Every time he's down, every time he sinks into the abyss, Olivia's the one who pulls him back up. She's his lifeline, and he's not going to let anything happen to her. Olivia's the beacon of light in Damian's dark world, and he's making a decision. If it means protecting her, he'll unleash the monster within. He's transforming and dashing out, leaving all his emotional baggage behind. Olivia's wondering if this wolf really just saved her. Silas is calling it pathetic, saying Damian's in no shape to take him down. He transforms into a wolf. And Olivia's eyes widen in shock. She can't believe what she just saw. A man turning into a wolf right before her eyes. Sarah's screaming at her to get out of there, but Olivia's frozen in place, her eyes fixed on the battling wolves. Sarah's calling out to her again, but she's not moving. She's too shocked, too amazed. The battle between the wolves is intense, gruesome even. Sarah's shocked by the sight. Silas has the upper hand, pinning Damian down. Olivia's concerned. She can't explain it, but she's not happy with the wolf losing the battle. Silas flings a bruised and bloody Damian in her direction, and she gasps for air, gripped with fear. Silas attempts to finish Damian off, but just in time, another wolf intervenes. It's Sarah Brown. They have a standoff. Olivia walks up to the injured wolf, blaming herself for his condition. She knows she should escape, but she can't leave. Not like this. She rips a portion of her dress and covers up the wounds on the wolf. It growls and trembles, but she tries to calm it down, saying she means no harm. Their eyes connect, and there's something about this wolf that Olivia can't explain. It's like her heart is aching with longing. She recalls meeting this wolf before, but it was just a dream. Or was it? She wonders if that dream stirred up emotions. But it's more than that. She feels a deep connection to this wolf. Her eyes meet his, and she sees Damian in those eyes. Olivia's stunned. Could it really be? Is this wolf really Damian? She's searching his eyes for answers, and what she sees there takes her breath away. Olivia's friend walks into the party venue, calling out for Sarah and her friend, wondering what's taking them so long. She notices some men in suits standing ahead and assumes they're security. She approaches them, asking if they could help her check if anyone's still inside. But as they turn in her direction, a chill runs down her spine. She wonders if they're not security guards. Then why are they still here, looking all shady and suspicious? Someone grabs her by the shoulder, pleading with her to stand back. It's Russell, Damian's secretary. He warns her that the men ahead are dangerous. She recognizes him, but he looks a bit worse for wear. She asks what happened to his face, but he doesn't get into the details. Instead, he steps forward, ready to take on the suspicious men, assuring her he'll deal with them. But the lady's not so sure. She thinks he looks a bit unreliable. She asks if he's certain he can handle them all. Father Lowell scoffs in disbelief, saying he thought Russell was dead from the explosion, but Russell's not having it. He says they'll all meet their maker much sooner than he will. Spitting in disgust at their treachery, Lowell promises to finish him off properly this time around and slowly begins to transform. The lady watches on in shock as the mystery unfolds before her eyes. She turns to Russell, wanting them both to make a run for it, but she's met with another shock. Russell transforms right in front of her. She's trembling. The wolves all stand across from each other. It's a standoff. Things are about to get rough. The lady's caught in the middle. Olivia's eyes lock onto the wolf, and she knows it's got to be him, Damian. The realization hits her like a ton of bricks. She remembers back to their conversation in the woods, when he said he's not an ordinary person. And now it all makes sense. The wolf's back on his feet, and he's treading forward towards Silas. The two lock eyes, and Silas flinches. Something's off. He's got a bad feeling, but he waves it off. He's confident he can take Damian down. Silas leaps towards Damian with bloodthirsty intent, but our guy dodges the assault and strikes back. Silas is caught off guard. He's confused. He was certain Damian was dying, so how is he suddenly so energetic and powerful? And then it hits him. This must be what Turner meant by Olivia's power. Damian stands victorious over a wounded Silas, and he strides towards Olivia. She touches him without fear, smiles, and thanks him for saving her. He sits in front of her, and she asks if he wants her to ride on his back. Damian nods, and Olivia gets on. They leave together, the wind blowing through their hair. Back at Damian's place, he transforms into his human form. Olivia sits on the floor, reflecting on all that's happened that day. Damian's standing with his back turned, staring out at the moon. He says he's got a confession to make, and Olivia's curiosity is piqued. He takes a deep breath and says it, "I'm a werewolf." Olivia stares up at him, her eyes wide with shock. It's really true. Damian's a werewolf, and from now on, things can never be the same again. The revelation hangs in the air, heavy with implications, and Olivia's not sure what to do next, but she knows one thing. Her life just got a whole lot more interesting. And the manhwa just got a whole lot more interesting too. But unfortunately, this wraps it for Season 1 and 2. If you enjoyed this recap, please like, share, and follow for more. Until next time, ciao!